If you need big hair, I'm there. If you need big hair, I'm there. If you need big hair, I'm there.
Well, I found me a tail, and it's ready for you. Hey, Georgie, please keep on calling my name. Sasquatch is jumping, keeps calling my name. That water rolls right on in, laying down the line.
Yes, back in December of 1995, when I was living in Tucson, Arizona, I was actually living in a desert. And one night I couldn't sleep, and I went outside about 3 o'clock in the morning and looked up, and I see this round glowing object going by. And I've seen at least about 150 UFOs in my lifetime. And the thing is that I'm a wilderness person, so I'm in the wilderness a lot, or in desert areas or mountains, and I get up at night and I look and look and look. So I've spent months alone in the wilderness over the years. So it's not surprising to me, but it may be to others, and in 25 years, that's still not a lot maybe that I've seen, but certainly I can say that, because if you're not out there looking up and you live in the city, or you go for a little walk in the country and you didn't see anything, well, you really haven't done anything to see anything. You have to really spend time out there. I spent the time out there. I did the work, and not argue or sit around as an armchair theorist and saying that all this stuff is nonsense. You go out there, when you experience it, one cannot unlearn how to swim. I can't make believe it didn't happen when it's happened over and over and over again in my lifetime. Again, specifically over the last 25 years. Now I'm getting people flooding in, and they've been doing this right along anyway, but more than ever, because my book's out, that people are coming to me and say, I experienced telepathy. There's spaceships going along with the Sasquatch. They're friendly. They're people. We realize they're people, and they're not animals like I thought. And they're just learning this, and I've learned this 25 years ago. So it's wonderful information, and there's more and more and more and more and more people. And those conservative Bigfoot researchers are dying off, and they're obsolete, because they think that this is unscientific, but it's their own fears. My paradigm is a threat to theirs, but it's just not a theory. I'm simply presenting the facts that I documented over the years. I'm being scientific by not subjectively excluding all these anomalies. That is, telepathy, interdimensionalism, UFOs, and ETs, and all that. Some people have accused me of saying, well, Kewaunee went out looking for UFOs and Bigfoot, so that's what he found, at least subjectively found. That's what they say. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, because when I discovered this and they kept coming to me and kept talking to me, I saw the ships, the ETs talk to me, the Sasquatch. I decided I would never tell anyone. In fact, I had no fear, but I really decided I wouldn't ever share this with anyone. Then I realized, well, what are you doing with this information? What if I wanted to bring some of this to mainstream science? I realized mainstream science is obsolete at this point. Again, because they are driving around on 3 cylinders. They don't have a complete empirical paradigm that they're working with. And so they're as fundamental as a Christian fundamentalist kind of thing. And I'm not putting Christians down, but I'm saying that are very strict and narrow in what they believe, and they stick to it. That's all I'm saying. They're well inculcated with this kind of information, and they don't leave any room for what's really out there, universally. So they're being subjective. This is subjective data collecting, and this has no room at all in scientific inquiry. And yet they claim they're the scientists, and I'm not. I've been willing to take that risk. Why? Because that reality overwhelmed me. It overwhelmed me so much that the first 2 years, I went in and out of denial. One minute I said, God, all this is real. I can't believe what happened and what they told me last night. And then a couple days later, that didn't happen. I was doubting myself because I couldn't accept it. I was an egghead with lots of, academic background behind me. 4 years ago, a man contacted me from Southern Oregon who was having Bigfoot experiences near Mount Shasta, and he used to live there in Shasta itself, in California. And they started telepathing to him sometimes every day, even when he wasn't in the woods. Now, he was very confused about all this. He didn't know who to talk to because there wasn't any information out there. And he didn't realize when he's thinking about the Sasquatch, he's telepathing to them so they come in and monitor him. Oh, I wonder what it's like you being in one room and somebody comes through the door and mentions your name and starts talking about you. If you listened in, you could monitor the conversation and say, what are they talking about me for? And you'd kind of listen in from another room, and this is from another dimension. So one night he claimed he had a dream, then he realized it wasn't a dream at all. The dream supposedly was that a Sasquatch came into his room, stood at the foot of his bed, held up my book, The Psychic Sasquatch and Their UFO Connection, and said, you need to talk to the person who wrote this book. You need to see him, and he'll answer all your questions. He'll understand what's going on with you. And so when he woke up, he thought to himself, God, it almost seemed like it really happened. But of course, it had to be a dream. Sasquatches don't walk through people's homes. Wrong. They do. And they can come into to many different places. They've come into my place, and the ETs have as well in the past. So, but it bothered him. I mean, he just he saw the picture on the cover of the book. He couldn't quite see the name, but he saw the picture and everything. And later that day, he went to the gym to work out with his friend. And his friend noticed that he was very quiet and didn't say very much, and like something was bothering him. So he asked him, what was bothering him. And he says, well, I had the strangest dream last night. Then he says, it doesn't even seem like a dream. But anyway, it's got to be a dream, of course. And he described the book and what happened. And his friend said, gee, he says, I bought that book yesterday, and I have it in my truck right now, which was my book. And as soon as he took it out of the truck and looked at it, this guy said, my God, that's the book that the Sasquatch held up. So I was asked by these researchers here if I would want to go up with them up towards Stevens Pass area by these lakes. And they generally go at night, and they've gotten howling sounds, screeching, and I have all that. They documented it, and I have it because they have a special antenna that shoots out into the forest, and they can record this, and it's quite accurate. When it was analyzed, they said it was nothing that human or no animal that they've ever known that could use that particular range. So I went up that night because the night before, there was two of them sitting there in their car, and all of a sudden the antenna just went crazy right in front of them. But of course they looked, there was nothing there, but one of them had had several Bigfoot experiences before, and his vibration went up and down, this certain vibration up and down his back, and all the way to his back of his head. And this happens to me all the time when there's a Bigfoot very close by, I mean like there. And they saw this, What happened was the Bigfoot was invisible. He was in another dimension. He walked by and he didn't see this slender, antenna from the car, like a wire, and just bumped into it, and it just went back and forth wild. I mean, that's probably what happened. And we got out of the car and we stood there watching and looking around for quite some time, and all of a sudden, at the base of the mountain, partway up, there was a lot of the snow was melting at the time, and this was, this was in March, the end of March 2004, just this year. And I said, look at that light over there. And he said, well, that's odd. And all of a sudden, I said, that's a spaceship. He says, oh, no, it isn't. I said, yeah, it is. I said, I can feel the energy from it. And all of a sudden, it lit up round in red and it glowing on the side of this mountain. And so we watched it for some time, and I said, look, it keeps changing colors and everything. So this is what we watched for probably 20 minutes. And we talked about it. I kept pointing it out, and this man was, I didn't really know him. It's the first time I met him, and he's a part of the group that I got to know. And finally, it started traveling east by southeast for about a quarter of a mile, and it was between two mountains, and it hovered there, flashing its lights. And I said, look, it's just hovering. We watched it do this together. And it stayed there a whole hour, and of course we were trying to connect with the Bigfoot, and we just got in the car finally after 4 hours being there, but watching this for hovering between the two mountains for about an hour. And I pointed out just before we left, I said, look, that ship is still there. It's still hovering there. And he agreed. He said, yeah, it is. Isn't that something? So we left, and I went home, and he went home, and I told one of the other researchers about this. And he went back and told this man, wow, you saw a spaceship. He says, no, he didn't. We saw a planet. And of course, it kind of shocked me, but here, this person was either in denial of what he had experienced, or else he didn't want to be labeled in a Bigfoot area seeing a spaceship. He didn't want that association. Incidentally, this goes on all the time, that people don't tell the whole story because they don't want to be laughed at or whatever, and so often they don't tell the entire truth. So when this other researcher friend approached him, and he denied it and said, oh no, it's just a planet there in the sky, which of course is totally untrue. After an hour and a half, he watched it when I watched it, and we discussed it and everything. So obviously he knew what was going on there, that it was not normal. It was a ship. So then my other associate who talked to him came back to me and said he mentioned it to him and he denied it. And so I told him, that he was either just plain out in denial and disbelief of it, or didn't want to be poked fun of. And he said, that's the area where two other friends of mine, the same researchers that are going up there now, were there 2 years ago looking for Bigfoot, and they were there at night, and the ship was on that same mountain, came towards them, and then literally came close to them, down close to where their vehicle was, and they ran and got in their vehicle and drove out of there quickly and were afraid. He says, this is the exact same area, this is the exact thing that happened. He said, so I believe you rather than my other friend here, because obviously he's in denial on some level. I just said, if I was up there and it came towards me, I would ask it, I would telepath to it and say, land, so, I can meet you. Or else, hey, take me for a ride. I'm not afraid of that kind of experience. So there's nothing to be fearful of, running from them. This was an ideal situation, because all ships do not, there's only a few, very few of these beings, because there's numerous, races of ETs here, and there's only one or two, I believe there's two, possibly three, that are outright evil. And these others will not hurt you at all. These others will not do anything to you. Now, in dowsing, I put this map to true north, put my hand on this, and I first ask, tune to the universal consciousness. It's like a tuning fork, you tune. And once I'm attuned, I hold the picture and ask to tune to the Sasquatch people. It does it immediately. Someone else, it would sit there and spin for the longest time, and they still wouldn't be that attuned. Now, I'm using this and I'm asking, where are the Bigfoot people? First I ask, is there a Sasquatch somewhere on this map in reality? And it says yes. Then I ask them to please point, where is the closest Sasquatch here on the map? And it points to a lake near Mount Pilchuck. And where it intersects, it goes one way, then another way. Where it intersects, that's where it is. And I can even take a pen and point, is it this side of the lake? Is it east side, north side, west side, south side? Whatever it is, it will tell me. So it's more accurate than one thinks, as long as you know how to use the pendulum within your mind. So I'm going to ask here, at this lake, Heather Lake at this point, are the Sasquatch on the south side? Are they on the north side? Are the Sasquatch on the west side? Are the Sasquatch on the east side? Strong yes. How many Sasquatch are there? Is there more than one? Yes. I'm going to jump ahead. Is there more than 5? No. There's many ways you can do this. So it gives you some idea. They're not going to come out and show themselves so you can say, oh, sure, I just proved this. But guess what? If the person watching this tape doesn't agree with me, then you tell me where to go to find a Sasquatch. You tell me where to go, because 75% of the time I will find tracks, sounds, and all that to verify that. So I may even be 90% correct or 100% correct, but if I can't find the evidence of tracks and sounds and things of that nature, then I don't count it as a hit. My take on this is that it's easy to find them doing it this way because this is a real photograph. I asked a Sasquatch in the Siskiyou Mountains of Oregon, coastal Siskiyous, in 1985 if this was a real photograph of one of their people, and they said yes, it was. This is of the ape-like kind with a conical head. The beings I was talking to that told me this had round-shaped heads and human-like faces. Not entirely human, but very human. And the women, believe it or not, were attractive, and they didn't have hair in their faces, and they were nude, but they had hair all over their bodies. So there are many different kinds, and I've experienced, like in Arizona, there was one 6.5 feet tall that walked up behind me. I turned and looked at him, and he smiled, and he had a human-like face, almost human. No hair on his face, and then he blipped out into another dimension. I watched him right in front of me.
Two women fishing by a river?
In northern Florida, and this Sasquatch came out, and they was behind them, and they turned around and were shocked that this creature was about 30 feet, 40 feet standing at the edge of the woods with an erection. And one of the women was having her period, and apparently it turned them on, and so they realized what this creature, at least, it did not approach them. It just stood there, but that for some reason, because they have these extra senses, it probably have a tremendous sensitive, sense of smell that did. So they quickly grabbed their gear and ran for the car and get in the car and left. So, these things happen, but the average person isn't going to advertise this and say, that, something like that might even be embarrassing to some people. And I found that a lot of people are not discussing the telepathy or the UFOs. They will eliminate that and because they figure it's hard enough discussing Sasquatch, never mind that they were telepathic, or they dematerialized in front of them, or that there was a spaceship involved. The Indians say that some of the women were captured by Sasquatch and taken, and it just seems preposterous. But at this point in time, I believe that it's absolutely true that on some very rare occasions, you know, at a few different tribes, that this has happened, and there seems to be something, some truth to it, and I think that we have to stop and look at it, because I was approached. I know one man who was cutting wood way up in the forest, and he bought my book. He was a ranch hand, and he always wanted to talk to someone who, you know, had some experiences and so on. And he said this female was really after him, in the sense that she was telepathing. She wanted him, and he, you know, was ready to leave the area, and he was in a kind of a area with real thick with rhododendron, and he was just a little bit too fearful, and he said that there was this aroma around where he didn't know if she was in heat or what, but he said it was almost like a perfume kind of a aroma that was very pleasant, and he knew the forest, and he was trying to figure out where it could come from. It could actually come from her. He didn't know. It just was something that very unusual, and it was very, as he said, very tantalizing and very pleasant. And that's at the time that she was telepathing to him that she wanted to have a sexual encounter with him. And he said, well, because the owner of the place knew me, who hired him, and he told the ranch hand that what I was into, that is about my research and what I had discovered, and about all these other people. And so he opened up to me and told me this particular encounter. So it never followed up, and then later he said, gee, I wished I kind of had, but she took me by surprise, that I was just a little fearful, and I had a lot of anxiety. And even though he said one minute he felt anxious, the next minute he was, you know, capitulating and giving in, and so he just didn't know what to do, and he finally just left. The one I saw had a human face. She was about 5.5 feet tall, and she had a 4-foot tall son, and she had a very beautiful face, and it was a human face, which kind of startled me, because I'm used to seeing the ones with the ape-like face and the conical heads, you know, the very high sagittal crests. But they're still a people. It doesn't make them any less a people. But the ones with human faces do seem to be more closer, and doing work closer to and with the star people on the ships. Even Dick Robinson, the originator of the Grizzly Adams series, who passed over, I think a year or two ago, had experiences with the human type Sasquatch that had, in fact, both, he told me, and he has these little statues made up of what they look like, and I was startled to see that the shape of the face of the human type ones, especially the female, was the same kind of shape face, you know, almost square-like, square jaw and high cheekbones, almost kind of a slightly Hawaiian look, you know, or face, kind of a darker complected, and very attractive. I mean, just and an hourglass figure. But these beings are still strong, even though they're, you know, some of them are only up to 6 feet or something, the female. But one female that I knew was about 6'5", 6'6", something like that. She could have been, yeah. But she propositioned me. She asked me, she said, I'm lonely. She said, I've left my people and have come through the door. That's what she said, in meaning the vortex that was up at this place, in a place called Tai. So it doesn't make me anything special, but I do understand the Sasquatch better than all these other mainstream, which is probably 80, 98, 99% of the Bigfoot researchers. Why? Because of personal experiences. And yet I think they're all doing a good job, and they all deserve some kudos and a pat on the back, because it's hard work. But they're not doing it objectively. If they are subjectively weeding out and throwing away information just because of their own personal beliefs, that they don't believe it, well, what is that going to do with anything, if they believe it or not? The idea is, if it's happening and people are telling them that, and it's being recorded over and over and over again, then there's the pattern that scientists look for, and they're totally ignoring that. They are not scientific at all. Neither was Grover Krantz about this. So I do not agree with these people, not because they're bad people, but because they don't know how to do the research. And unlike Grover Krantz, I do not ride the roads just on weekends with a loaded rifle in my back seat trying to shoot a Sasquatch to prove it. So that's not research. I do it more in the Jane Goodall tradition, where I go out, I map dowse, go out into the field dowse, find an area that looks good, where there's water somewhere nearby and so forth, and set up a tent and bring in equipment and stay there. I read, I write. I'm a master herbalist, so I like to go out and find edibles and medicinal plants, just like the Bigfoot do. They go around and forage and look for things, and I do it as a Bigfoot would, and simply meditate twice a day while I'm out there. I stayed very low-keyed. I bring no guns, and I find out I have more experiences if I don't bring a camera. And so I have not brought a camera for many years. Yes, I would want a picture of them. Yes, I'd want one on, to zoom in on one. But if I did that, that would be too treacherous for them. They would think that I would be deceiving them, and they probably would stop contacting me. This here is Oregon grape. It's everywhere in the Pacific Northwest. In August and September, the grapes will come out, and they're edible. If you eat too many, it's just like when the bears eat too many berries, it gives them the runs, But if you were lost in the wilderness, you could consume it. Also, I don't see any here, but when they're tiny, and there are some that are still tiny over the summer that are just coming out, these are very stiff and very leathery, but they end up being soft, the small ones that come out, and they're very edible. The leaves are, and you can eat them if you're lost in the wilderness. And also, they have a slight vinegary taste, which is kind of pleasant. I must admit I like it. If you were camping out and you cut yourself and you started to become infected, what you do is you dig up the root and break it up and wash it, and then you simmer the root. It's an antibiotic. The Oregon grapefruit is powerful enough if you simmered it up, because you need to draw out. Leaves you steep and flowers, but the root you need to simmer for a while in order to draw the medicinal quality out, which is the volatile oils there in the root. And it's for staph infections, for strep throat, and for, if you had any kind of infection in your body, you can consume it. And it's used also to clean your liver. It's a safe herb for the liver that you can take ongoing. So it isn't it that the root itself is a true antibiotic that probably would kill, and I mean this because I'm a research scientist and I study this, that it would kill this flesh-eating bacteria that regular laboratory-made antibiotics can't touch. This is entirely different antibiotics that these bacteria are not used to. They have no idea what's going to hit them, and it's very powerful. I've had people who had staph infections all over their bodies, and they were, attached to tubes intravenously for 6 months, because if they let up, the person would die. And they told them, well, sooner or later it may kill you because nothing's worked. They tried everything. And as soon as I put them on a herbal antibiotic, I know that this particular case I'm talking about, that the guy had sores all over his body. In 1 month, he was totally free of staph infection, which was systemic. So this was one of the herbs that I used. Very nutritious.
Wow, very nice.
Like eating a salad.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute. This is poison ivy. No, only joking. I mean, it's interesting because blackberries if you eat too many blackberries, it'll give you diarrhea. But on the other hand, the cure is there in the root. Again, you'd have to simmer the root and drink it, and the diarrhea would go away. It's just like poison oak. People that get poison oak, if they realize they're in a poison oak patch, they need to look for mugwort. And mugwort is almost looks like a hand, with very finger-like kind of, and it's not a very big plant. It's only 3 or 4 feet tall. And you could make a decoction from it and pat it on, and also you can drink some of it. But basically it's patting it on, putting it on topically to get rid of the itch and to mitigate the itching and the outbreak itself. And it works. It absolutely works. Better than a lot of things you can buy in the pharmacy. So it's always within 100 feet of whatever's going on that you can find the cure. I look up a lot, because I look for birds. I've seen a lot of spaceships, but you got to be able to look up. But I look down as well, and in the Indian tradition, and looking for all kinds of spore.
Do you find Sasquatch spore?
I found a lot of tracks. I found a lot of feces, handprints, hair, not fur, hair. I had them analyzed at the Medical College of Wisconsin by a forensic pathologist. He checked them out even under an electron microscope and so on. I have everything. What I do, I've already had, I've got screams. I've got all kinds of stuff that, from Bigfoot. As much physical evidence as one can get. And I agree, we don't have a Bigfoot to match it against, but someone in Tennessee handed a Bigfoot some food, and she took her fingers like this and squeezed them. When she handed it to him because the hair was everywhere, and when she pulled back, she had 3 strands of hair that was for analysis. So it's good to do that, but it doesn't get you anywhere. The point is, I want to know about their culture. I want to know about their lives and what they do and where they come from, where they're going. I was living in Flagstaff, Arizona at the time, and I went to visit a medicine woman, Indian medicine woman in Sedona, and we talked till midnight, and it was an hour to get back, and I was tired and yawning there, and she said, "Look, why don't you stay in my guest room?" And so I decided to do that, and as soon as I went in and shut the light off, 4 6.5-foot kachinas appeared at the foot of my bed. And the Hopi say, that these are basically ETs that live up on the mountains and come to them in certain ceremonies. And they come generally to medicine people, and I'm a medicine man. And they said to me, "We know that you have cancer and that you're not doing anything about it, and we want to help you. And this is what you need." And they told me what you need, and they told me about my life and so on. They did this for 50 minutes. And every time they moved at the foot of my bed from one side to another, I heard their feathers rustling, and I heard their bells on their legs go when they moved from side to side. And they had beaks like and everything. They were beautiful, and I never felt such love. I knew what unconditional love was just by being in their presence. And they were totally non-judgmental. I knew what non-judgmentalness meant because of how they talked to me. because they said, you've been waiting because you don't care right now, you're depressed and so on, and so you must do something. But if you don't, then that's okay, because then you'll leave this earth. But many people who will need you, you won't be there for them in the future. And so if you choose to do that, so these are the herbs to take. And they told me which herbs to take, and I did. In 5.5 weeks, I was completely well.
I'm a friend of Kewaunee's. Known him an awful long time, but it's the first meeting after 40 years. And we made contact around about May of this year. I decided to come over for a couple of months. He talked so much about where he lived and everything else. Richard and Kewaunee picked me up from the airport around about 10. We arrived here around about 11ish on the Monday evening, 13th of September. The following day, with Kewaunee having to do work from home and everything else, and I didn't want to be eavesdropping or in his way, so I suggested that I sit out on the deck here, which she got me a seat and everything, and I did. And I started to read a magazine, and I maybe had been sat out about 10, 15 minutes when I was disturbed by what I can only describe as really loud, like thumping noises, but the sound of all the branches and twigs and everything all cracking and making a noise. And when I turned, I actually thought I would see something, and I couldn't.
What time of day was this?
This was round about 1:30, just after lunch. And I couldn't see anything, and I was a little bit worried because bears or whatever. So I went back inside, and I got within about 5 feet of the door, something like the distance I am now, and it just disappeared. The door, the wall and everything. It wasn't there anymore. It just wasn't there anymore. And what was there on the lawn was this creature. Just this creature, I was taken aback, I was startled, but I wasn't frightened. I just wasn't frightened. I remember just stood there, just looking, and there was... I didn't speak, and there was no... It didn't speak to me verbally, if you can understand what I mean. It was just like it was... I don't know. I've never experienced it, so I'm a little bit...
Telepathic, perhaps?
Yes. I'm a little bit confused by the whole thing. This is why I didn't tell Kewaunee straight away, because I was still trying to come to terms with what had happened and what, if it was possible for something like this to happen. It's, well, I don't know, it's just so strange. It's just so strange, but I know I wasn't frightened. I wasn't frightened at all.
Well, I knew exactly what had happened when she explained it, because there's 3 kinds of telepathy, visual telepathy, verbal telepathy, and feeling telepathy. And she experienced the feeling telepathy and the visual, and that's why she thought that she could see through the door, because he was putting in her mind and showing her himself. This has happened to me several times. And one Sasquatch who was 6.5 feet tall showed me himself, and he said there's 4 others waiting for him that he can't stay, and he showed me them in my mind. He says he showed me I knew exactly where they were, because I knew the woods and the field and everything. This is by the Mount Adams Wilderness in Washington State. So that's just one example of how I've experienced stuff like that. And so it's, there's so many theorists out there that says, oh no, telepathy is really this and that. And I asked them, have you ever experienced it? Well, no, but in this book it says, I said, well, I don't care what it says in the book. I mean, it's close to it, but it's still not it. And this is, you have to experience it. And I've experienced it several hundred times in 25 years. So I know exactly what it is. And as soon as she explained it, I just explained it to her, and it made sense to her Oh, okay, that made sense. And it's a special thing that the Sasquatch came to her. It's a good omen because he's going to be watching over her while I go away to lecture for 3 days, and he'll be around. And I told her that now she'll be able to talk to them and think at them, which is telepathy, while I'm gone, and see what happens. They'll maybe come inside as they've done before here, and so on. So it's a whole new thing. I mean, she's not a researcher. What does she care about all this? But she experienced it because they want her to. She has good vibrations, and she's a good person. So they, and they're associated. She's associated with me, and so that's how that works. It's not a monster to go out and hunt.
No. I honestly believe they helped me that night, with my breathing and sleep, because it's clearing. It's actually clearing up now. The night that it actually happened, I just could hardly breathe. I mean, I felt really ghastly.
So this is approximately where she said it was standing.
Mm-hmm.
And we see disturbed earth.
There's more over there. I don't. They have flat feet. This is kind of dug up, so I really don't believe that this is.
Is it possible that animals are attracted to a spot where it's been standing?
No, generally it's the opposite.
The opposite.
They stay away. Yeah, I don't believe that has anything to do with when they have flat feet and they're walking along stuff. It's hard to see anything as a rule. I've met people. I remember at a conference, I met a woman and her partner, and she bought a book from me, and then later she came to another conference about a month later and bought 2 or 3 more books to give to people. And she said while she was reading my book, just starting to read it, but she was about 30 minutes into the book, and she lives just north of Seattle in a suburb, I mean, with houses all around and everything. She heard a thump on the side of the house, and when she felt like she was being watched before then, and then that happened, and she looked at me and she says, "That wasn't Bigfoot though, was it? I mean, could have been? I mean, she says, it seemed like it." And I says, "It was. Even though it looked, you think you're in the city and they're not around, they can do anything they want to do. They can teleport from one place to another. How they do it, I do not know. But it seems to be a true phenomenon." I was talking with a researcher the other day that they seem to understand and be able to find people easily. I have an implant that they said the ETs put in my abdomen, and that so they can find me anytime they want. And it's true, any little thing that happens, they're just there instantly. And I mean really instantly. I don't mean in 30 seconds or in 1 minute or something. It's I don't know how they do it, but they do want to protect certain people. And because I speak for them, they, the real them. One Sasquatch commented about my book and said, "These are the human type ones now." And they said, when asked about my book, to see if they knew anything about it, to this contactee, the contactee was a little shocked that the Sasquatch said, "Kewaunee's book is true." And so I said, "My God, it's right from the from the Sasquatch's mouth." The average person, and I'll just say 95% maybe of researchers wouldn't believe any of that, and they don't. They're still way in the past, doing primitive type of research, thinking they're after a monster, and don't have a clue that telepathy is real. Again, this month, September 2004, it's been exactly 25 years last week that they came to me out of my 49 years of research. They came to me to, as I say, people said to me, "Well, oh, you're into the into the psychic stuff. You're into the telepathy stuff. I said, no, I'm not into that. So they're into me. They came to me and showed me who they were. They illustrated it by coming in person and by showing me their power. I don't apologize for speaking the truth, the objective truth, and what happened. And now there's 105 people she's 106, sorry.
You counted me in there. I'm 104.
Right, I did. And somebody else.
Make sure that I'm in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's 106 people now that have had telepathic experiences, psychic experiences with the psychic Sasquatch. And I mean, they keep happening. And Lynn has no interest in Bigfoot whatsoever. She could care less. And yet it happened to her. So now, it's got her attention. She's not into psychic stuff. She could care less. All this stuff, she could care less. But they're into her, just like they came into me and showed me who they were by doing materializing, dematerializing, astral projecting to me, telepathing to me, doing all the things that they did. And here I was at Egghead, social scientist with 10 years of college and 4 degrees, and I'm just doing what I'm trained. They didn't train me in this area of anthropology. It's a delightful type of, and a wonderful type of craziness in a way. That's how I used to describe it. Now it's just normal stuff. I'm not going to alter objective research just to please mainstream science.
Right.
Just to tell them what they want to hear. I'm just telling them what I found, what I discovered. That's what science is about. At least that's what I was told when I was in graduate school. So I'm just following suit, and I'm being criticized for it. I don't care anymore. I used to care. I'm having too much fun, experiencing them and growing, and I'm growing spiritually. I'm growing intellectually from it, and my life has changed for the better, and I'm happy for it.
So this is called Devil's what?
Club.
Devil's Club, and
it's used for diabetes, but if you make a tea of it and fast for 24 hours, it's this right here. It gives you in kind of an altered state a little bit. I've never done it. I have no need to do it, but other herbalists have tried it, in that sense, just to experience that, because it's safe. It's not unsafe. But it's found throughout the Pacific Northwest here. Just a few years ago, a Bigfoot researcher told me this yesterday, that there was someone up here deer hunting. They weren't right on national forest land, but right at the edge of it. And it was getting dark. It was gray out, and he looked up, and a 10-foot Sasquatch, as they say, was walking right towards him. I mean, super close. And the guy freaked out and just pulled up his gun and shot him right in the heart. He aimed right for the heart, and he saw it, it hit the heart. And now, I guess we can assume that that's where the heart is on a Sasquatch. But, they may have such powerful chests and bones, again, who knows, I don't understand this, that it didn't penetrate, because the creature screamed and started crashing through and breaking branches and small trees and got out of there, but howling and screaming, and the guy's never seen anything like it. And he jumped into behind this log. There was a couple logs that were kind of down over each other, and it made a little protective area, and he did not walk out, because the creature went in the direction where his truck was. So he was afraid to walk over in that direction, and he hovered there all night long until it got light the next morning, and holding on to his rifle. He was so scared. I mean, it made such an impression on him. Now, my take on this, of course, the Sasquatch was not going to hurt him. He had a better chance of being killed by the Sasquatch by simply shooting at him as he did. His life was at stake. And maybe the Sasquatch or another Sasquatch was there waiting for him. That's possible, because it's attempted murder. It's not an animal, it's a person, so it's attempted murder. That's how I view it, and it's true. So the thing he should have done was, again, people don't know, is simply to lay his gun down and just sit there and wait, or stand there and put his hands up in the air like this and nod to him and change his attitude. But I know how to do that, and the average person doesn't. The average person doesn't understand the mind of the Sasquatch, and that they're not out to hurt us. So when we try to hurt them, that's when, they get riled up and could potentially kill you. I mean, you have to look at it from the standpoint of, if you were hiking out in the forest and you heard these branches breaking, you were way in the wilderness, and you're on a trail and something coming towards you, and you could see the figure of a 6.5-foot man-like being coming towards you, and you pull up ready to shoot, and then you realize that coming out of the woods was really a person, but you were going to blast them, and it was maybe a black man that was just happened to be tall and big, and he had leaves on him and branches and stuff, to make him look different, because he got lost. And he walks up to you and said, oh hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so, and I'm here with my family, and I just got lost. Maybe you can tell me which way to where I'm camped. So that's precisely what this is all about. It's racial discrimination. We've gone through that in this country. The Western European mind is so twisted that, it was okay to have black people as slaves, and that they said that Darwinian theory proved that they should be slaves, because they're halfway on the evolutionary scale between people, that is us, white Westerners, and monkeys. Can you imagine that kind of a comparison? To me, it's outrageous. Then the Chinese came in, the cheap labor, the coolies, to build the railroads and stuff. Some people didn't want to pay them. I mean, there was maybe 50 or 100 coolies, and they just shot them. So they didn't have to pay them, because they were in the middle of the wilderness. There's nobody there who was going to do anything. This was back in the 1800s. This happened. And what they did to Native Americans, the genocide. A lot of the Sasquatch aren't going to make a show of what they can do interdimensionally or psychically or spiritually. They want us to, the less we know about them, the better. Why? Because their survival is at stake because of it. We will figure it out and try to harm them. That's how demented our thinking is, and how a lack of spirituality we have in our society. I've met a lot of people, Christians and so on, of many different sects, that are, talk about God and all this stuff, and then they go home and, have a few highballs and kick their dog and tell their wives to go to hell. So, and they're Christians, supposedly, because they're not practicing, they're not working on themselves. So it is a matter of respect. That's what spirituality is about, respecting all living things. And it's people say, oh, that's just a Native American concept. You're just grabbing a hold of that. I'm not grabbing a hold of anything. I'm telling universal reality. I've already had this in me years ago, as a boy. And so it's nothing new. The idea is that our oceans are dying. There's less oxygen in the air. There's more pollution in the air. Our forests are being clear cut. The old stands of timber, our greedy loggers, the politicians are allowing them to clear cut these lands in order for profit, rather than leaving it for posterity, and to have our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren have this land and see this stuff. And experience it, because we need it. It's an extension of us. We wouldn't think of cutting off our arms and legs and fingers, because it's an extension of us. We can live without it in a sense, so we can still function, but we cannot function without oxygen. And it's the plants that are dying. In terms of the rainforest is being clear cut as well. The plankton, most of the oxygen comes from plankton from the oceans. In Hanford, on the Columbia River, they were dumping nuclear waste into the Columbia River. They wonder why we've got problems with whales and with salmon populations as well. Of course, there's overfishing. we don't get it. We don't get it, that this is it. A Sasquatch told me back in 1985, if we don't change by 1990, that we will be at a point of no return. And the only way to pull out of it is to have a majority of the population on this planet dead. Why? Then their waste, both human waste, animal waste, because we raise cattle that take up most of the land that could be used for other things to produce food, because it takes so much to produce a beef animal. So if there's a population, and they told me there may be 1 billion to 1.5 billion people left from the 6.5 billion that are on this planet now. So by the time because the Indians call it the Great Purification, so we're in trouble. I mean, we're in bigger trouble than we realize. It's frightening, and it's sad, and it's neurotic, borderline psychotic, because people can be nice to you, these corporate people, and I'll donate this and this and that to this church or this organization or whatever, while they're destroying the rest of the planet. Their products do. So it's getting psychotic how we deal with things. And the Sasquatch have taught me to flow with nature, respect people, and this isn't happening. This is not happening. This Sasquatch that was shot, maybe it went off and died. And if so, it was telepathing to its own people where he was at so they could come and get him, so no one would find his body decomposing, simply because they don't want any evidence. Because once you get evidence, people will come in droves. They want to be the first. They're going to sell it for $10 million or $5 million or whatever, or maybe chop it up in pieces and sell each section to make more money and so on. And we'll get more of them and this kind of thing. Some of them do go into another dimension. I'm not sure exactly. How would I know? They haven't told me this, and this is speculation, but he could have gone into another dimension. I don't think so, but they do. Someone told me that a Sasquatch showed them a family member that was dead in another dimension, that they had brought them there so they wouldn't be found. Maybe they can't do this all the time, and maybe some of them are buried, and in fact I know that's for a fact, they are buried in this dimension as well, but it's all secretive, and often they'll do it near a cliff where they can pick up these gigantic boulders that no 10 men could ever move, if they even knew there was a Sasquatch buried underneath. So I worked for Native American people for years. I lived with them. I studied with them. I was married to a Native American woman, a Navajo woman. So I don't want people digging up my parents' grave. And Native Americans don't want their ancestors dug up. So why would we think it's okay to dig up a Sasquatch grave if we found one? Because I thought I would douse and find that years ago. I thought, that would be a way to do it. We wouldn't hurt anyone, and at least we'd have the bones and all this. And guess what? As a scientist, as a bona fide scientist, I don't really care. I rather have the communication, and if people don't want to believe it, then those people are the losers in this game of Sasquatch hunting. I don't care. I'm not going to, first of all, alter reality to try to please them just so I can get some kudos from them and they'll accept me, because I'm not fully accepted because of what I do. But I'm right on. Why? Because they tell me, even the Sasquatch say, you're a brilliant scientist. You're the one that could figured us out. You figured everything out. And the other scientists have no idea what's going on with us. They think we're animals. And I said, no, you're not animals. I don't view you that way. He says, I know you don't. But you understand us, and they don't. And that's okay. So you like some recognition for 49 years of research. I mean, it's a long time. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm saying it's almost a half a century. Yeah, this is horsetail that they used to be about 20 feet tall during the time of the dinosaurs. Now they only get to be about 3 feet, sometimes 4 feet I've seen around. It's for kidneys and bladder if you have a kidney ailment. But also it's got tremendous drawing power, and I've used it for a man that had a cancerous ulcer on the side of his body here by his hip. The doctors couldn't do anything, and we just simply made a poultice of this and laid it on, and it drew it out. It was gone in 4 days. So herbs are very powerful. It's a totally different kind of healing than what doctors attempt to do. This particular night, this ship that I saw down in the Sonora Desert, I telepathed to it, and it stopped and hovered there. And I says, is there a Sasquatch aboard or close by? I said, want to gain more prosperity in life. I want to help other people, and I want to grow more spiritually. And spirituality is not religion. It has nothing to do with religion or any doctrine. It's simply respect for all living things, whether it's the forest, whether it's not throwing cans of beer in the river, polluting the river, which again will affect the fish and frogs and everything else. So it's respect for all living things, including people, even if people offend you. It's thinking good thoughts towards other people as well, and raising one's spiritual vibrations. And one way to do it, of course, is through prayer, which is talking to God, and then meditation, which is listening to God. And this is some kind of connection. I don't pretend to understand the dynamics of this, but this is what I find is very real. Because what we cannot scientifically prove, we can prove to ourselves experientially. So I'm an empirical scientist, but I'm also in terms of a social scientist, but I'm also a experiential scientist. That is, I go out and experience it, and if I experience it over and over again, and if I find other people who've experienced this over and over again, then I feel there's nothing wrong with saying this is a real phenomenon. It's more real than people running around and say, I have this track. Well, there's so many fake tracks running around out there as well that who knows what they've got. To me, that's more a point of contention than myself, who can come up with 101 people who've experienced the same thing I did, which means they objectified my reality. Well, that's more scientific, I think, than a lot of things that these other so-called scientists, or pseudoscientists perhaps, depends which way you look at it, are experiencing, or what their statements they're making. A lot of them are very fallacious. And of course, all your well-known researchers have never had an experience, and they will never have an experience based on what the Sasquatch themselves told me. If it seems like this is an exclusive kind of thing, it is, but I didn't make the rules. I didn't even ask for any of this. I'm glad it happened to me, but I didn't ask for it. So if the rules are that, and if you're helping people and thinking love towards other people, unconditional love, you're raising your vibrations, and it's changing the violent nature of our world right now, or at least affecting it on some level. And apparently the Sasquatch and the good ETs are a part of this and want to connect only with people who are involved in this. And of course they know by simply somehow they can tune into their vibrational frequency. I know a woman who told me that in Utah the Sasquatch would come into her house and come into her room. Her husband was a light sleeper, but whenever the Sasquatch came in, he never woke up, no matter what happened. And the Sasquatch would sit on the bed and hold her hand. She said he had a horn coming out from his forehead, one horn that looked odd, and she didn't know if it was a growth, or an actual horn, and she still never figured that out, how that could be. But he was very kind. She says he was about 7 foot tall. He was very kind to her and used to talk with her telepathically about certain things, and all kind of more mundane things. But he also gave her spiritual advice, and he would come into her house at night and numerous times and asked even if she would go with him, and she was too afraid and said no. And but this one, she said, "I'm lonely, will you come and visit with me?" And I said, "I can't right now, I'm busy helping someone." I said, and she said, "It is good to help others, but I am lonely, and if you come," she said, I want you to make love to me, and if you come, I might even let you take a picture." And she looked at me with a very sly look, as if to deliberately lure me, and I'm not sure she would ever have stuck to that.
Was this a mental image you were seeing?
This was a mental, well, she had astral projected to me, so I could see right through her, and she stayed there for, I don't know, probably 1 full minute, so it was easy to see her, and the energy from her was very beautiful, very soft, and at least scientifically it would have been an interesting experience, and besides, you'd get to really understand and interact with a being that would be one of the most rare experiences of one's life. And
so you say you regret it? You regret that you maybe did?
To a point,
did
not intensely so or anything, but if I think about it long enough, I'd say, that would have been real interesting, and I would have learned a lot because I would have asked her a lot of questions, and she might have felt obligated to tell me more, because I was obliging her. There's all these considerations, and she might have taken me through the door, and I would have had a chance to meet her son, I saw their tracks 9 months before, and I had somebody with me, and they were in the snow, the same area on Tyee Mountain. So it was like this was a special place here in Washington.
I want to ask a question. I hope you don't take it the wrong way, but in the interest of science, how would you have gotten? How could you have made it with her? Could you have gotten aroused by her?
Don't know. I don't know. It's just the difference would be that she has a lot of hair. On her entire body, but I don't know. That's certainly I don't care to speculate because I have no idea about these beings on that level and what they can do, or maybe even mentally stimulate you just with energy from herself. And who knows? Maybe an orgasm would be 10 times as much, or whatever. And I don't know. It's just we can speculate all day, and that becomes pornographic, and that's not where I want to go with it. So, but the point is that again, I don't worry about it, but if I have to think about it, or somebody asks me like yourself, and you could say, yeah, there's a few sprinklings I regret, but it's something I can live with. And I think when I arrived here in Seattle about a year later, this was in year 2000, I met a British UFO researcher, a woman who had been doing researching, I think, for about 40 years or more in the UFO area. And she said that she interviewed a man who lived in a small cabin by a lake, about 60 miles or 70 miles or 75 miles southeast of Seattle. So right out in the boonies someplace, and that he had noticed UFOs over the lake that he lived on. It was just a small lake. It wasn't anything huge or anything. And he, wondered about it, and he went out one morning to go for a walk by the lake, and he noticed, and here it was in a time where there was, had been raining and that kind of thing, but half the water had gone down a few feet, and I believe he had seen a ship hovering with some kind of a device like a hose going into the lake. But again, it was a small lake. Probably back east we would refer to them as a pond rather than a lake. And so then about a month later, there was a knock on the door just as he was going to bed, and he went to the door and opened the door. He had no idea who could be there. And he said there was a female Sasquatch standing there. It was about 6 foot tall, and she came in and was very friendly to him, and said, "I wanted to make love to you." And the man was, I believe, about 60 years old at the time, and by himself. He was I think a widower, from what I understand. And so they ended up in bed, and they miscegenated, you might say. And she left, and when she left, she got up out of bed and walked straight through the wall. And so somehow she could go back interdimensional again. And I hear this over and over again, and you get enough, cases of this. After a while, if it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and sounds like a duck, you got to start giving into it and say, well, it must be a duck. And I had personal experiences, and I have no reason to lie, and these other people have too. My wife did too. My ex-wife, who was Navajo, walked right through the door, both doors, the front door and then the bedroom door. The Sasquatch did when a UFO landed outside, and lights, the electricity was going off and on, and the fans and the refrigerator were going off and on, and so on. So there's some kind of electromagnetic disturbance that goes along with some of these phenomena. Now, she came back. I think it was 6 months later, something like that, but it was later. It wasn't right away. And she knocked on the door again and banged on the door, and he went to the door and opened the door, and she just stood there, and she said to him, "I thought I'd come back and tell you that it took," and smiled at him and walked away. So nothing was ever said. And the UFO researcher, who was, I would say the woman was about 70 years old, at least that, was very wise and seemed to have a good understanding of the UFO phenomena. And she says this is the Sasquatch, apparently, she asked me if I agreed with this, that was interbreeding with us, that somehow both of us may be from an ET stock, and each one of us was hybridized and went into a different direction, and still we're we're seated down here at different times, and now we're kind of overlapping by realizing that each one of us exists. Of course, they know that we exist, but we're the more aggressive, we're the dangerous ones, we're the ones that make everything go into extinction, and possibly them, so we're a threat to them right away. It doesn't take long. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out, our bellicosity of the human race. That kind of drive, that kind of attitude, that kind of thing that makes for not other beings and other tribes and so on not wanting to interact with us, because we're just not there yet. Then they say, well, why are you so lucky? Well, they're going to people who won't hurt them. They're going to people who like to help other people. They go to people who have a spiritual attitude. They go to people who are not trying to put them in a zoo or sell their bodies, or trying to get rich off of them. That's the people they go to, because apparently greed and a focus of materialism or anything that stimulates the ego is of a lower vibration, where they are more egoless in how they deal with things, even though they are, I believe, some of the things they do are instinctual and some very definitely are learned. And this is that balance. They've got these two qualities that we say can't exist, but they don't need all our technology like we have. They have their own kind of a psychic radar, just like bats have radar, whale sonar, and geese and other migratory birds, their own inner type of direction finding and so on, and things that don't look very complicated because the birds are small, but certain birds and so on, but nevertheless they all know what to do. It's all in sync. They must have something that we don't have that's invisible to us and naive to us, and the Sasquatch is the same way. I mean, obviously we don't question, the geese. Everyone accepts the fact that they go from north to south or north or south to north. I mean, why the hell don't they go east to west? Or why don't they go up and down, go to the moon or something?
My encounter with these two red eyes that I had previously talked about occurred in Los Angeles, and it was in summer of 1986. I would say it was probably in August, late July or in August of 86. And I was living there in a little one-bedroom apartment while I was working for a summer. And it was probably, Lord, I don't know what time it was in the morning. It was in the morning, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And it's fading into the past, but I still remember pretty well about it. I'm sleeping, and all of a sudden I come awake, and I find that it's very difficult to move my body, but I know that there's something in the hallway, and I can see from my bed right out the door into the hallway. And so I'm struggling, and I finally lift my head up and I look out there in the hallway, and then I see out there these two red dots that are out there that are just sort of, moving. And a girlfriend at the time was in bed there as well, and I'm thinking to myself, is she seeing this? What is this? What's going on? And I just remember, trying to have myself become aware of it, make someone else aware of this thing. There was a kind of a sense of dread I had. It was not a pleasant experience. And then as I was trying to come to terms with this, or say, hey, do you see this too, kind of thing, I noticed a lot of vibration. There was, like this thing going on, both physically and auditorily. I heard this kind of feedback vibration thing, and my body started doing like that. And by that point, I was just starting to just like freak out. And pretty much immediately after that, it was as though it became too much, and I just passed out. Boom. And I was back. I guess I went back to sleep, but it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to sleep now. It was more just like, this is way too much, and my brain shut down. And then I still don't understand to this day. The next day I got up, and I seem to remember asking her, do you remember anything like that? And she was just sort of like, let's just not talk about that. And then I just didn't say anything more about it. I mean, it was like this intense thing. And then the next day I was immediately beginning to want to wipe it out.
Yeah, well, it could have been an ET or it could have been a Sasquatch, but it's too bad you didn't have a chance to talk with your lady friend, because then it would have filled in some pieces to the puzzle, and give her a day or two to kind of process it, and then tell her it's okay to talk about it. And
well, I know it was real. I just immediately was like pushing it away.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Sasquatch has been. I've got pictures even of Sasquatch with the red eyes peeking through from another dimension. So I know that happens. I've map dowsed and had people go to certain places. I remember in Minnesota, I did for a researcher there years ago, and he went out in the area and camped out overnight, and him and his lady friend, and these red eyes came out of and you couldn't see any bodies attached to the red eyes, but came out of these bushes and then kind of hovered there. My understanding, even though this is purely theoretical, is that when they're peeking, like I remember one person told me the Sasquatch was crossing the road, in front of them in Utah, and that it looked over at him, and when it did, all of a sudden the eyes started glowing red. And he says, I thought it was diabolic, that this had something to do with something evil. And then after questioning the man, who seemed very articulate and very intelligent, he had his own construction company, found out that he was very religious, so he applied the evilness to it, see. But he asked me, why would that happen like that? What causes that? And I told him, I says, I think that's, my own theory is that they're ready to go into another dimension because they're being threatened, possibly. Maybe they thought, oh, wait a minute, maybe you've got a gun and you're going to shoot at him. So he could quickly go into another dimension. Because in Ohio, back in 1980, they had 80 and 81, they had spaceships landing, and they had these Sasquatch out there, and all of this going on. And the guy was a veteran from Vietnam in this farmhouse, and he got out his guns and went up on the roof and waited and laid there on his roof. And then when the Sasquatch came out by the edge of the woods, he shot one, and it went down. And then the other one helped it up, and the wounded one, and went into the forest. And then he saw all these red eyes, and he aimed at the red eyes, and he shot a whole box of shells. And of course, he never hit anything. He went out there, and he shot a lot of trees. So what was that about? How could they disappear like that? They went into another dimension, is my interpretation of this, and therefore they were peeking out from a safe zone, which was an area that was no longer physical. So you could shoot at them all you want, and they were there, but they weren't there. So some people, oh no, you were just dreaming. Well, if I was dreaming, why was I feeling this and seeing that? And
Right.
And there was just too many senses being utilized during this time frame to just say, oh no, it's just a dream. When you know how it feels in a dream.
Yeah.
So and that's a comparison. We've all dreamed. We all dream every night.
But what you were saying, Kewaunee, reminded me of earlier. I've talked about 1980 and 1981 in Ohio. That's where I was at the time going to school. And I drove by a lake on the way to school. It's near the Serpent Mound. It's called Rocky Lake, Rocky Fork Lake. And I had a missing time experience I think it was 81.
Mm-hmm.
Where I drove to the Serpent Mound, and I don't remember what happened. I don't remember the drive from then on. I kind of remember waking up, and I was like a few miles out of Cincinnati. Yeah.
Well,
But at that same time, at that very lake, there were two sites. There was one year and one the next year of a maybe it's a Batsquatch. I don't know, but it's a Mothman. It's an entity that looks like. That can make itself look like a tree, but it's really a bird-like thing with wings, and it sort of looks like a big Bigfoot with wings. And I'm starting to find more stories about Bigfoots with wings, and that whole time period was very relevant for me, and it got me actually changed the course of my life around that time period. And that's also when I ran into my psychic friend Harriet, who gave me a protector message from my dad, who was dead. She had seen a medium. The medium had mentioned my dad's name, said, your dad has a message. Andy Colvin's dad has a message for him that he's got a protector. And you were just speaking about the protector yesterday
Mm-hmm.
when I talked with you, or whenever that was. You were saying that you had a protector in the Bigfoot world, so to speak.
That's what they told me, and it seems to be true. Well, I want to comment first on what you said, that the Batwatch, the Sasquatch with wings, if you said that to any researcher, probably 99% of them would just bust out laughing and terminate the conversation with you because they'd say you're drunk on drugs or just outright crazy. But this whole field gets, the anomalies, it's an anomaly within an anomaly kind of thing. There's so much going on in this field, and there's so little research being done. There's a lot of historians out there that just mimic, or should I say regurgitate, what has happened with other people and what they have read. And if you go to the books, a majority of them, they're all the same book, just different circumstances. So these people, how they can keep printing these books and cranking them out, they're so boring. It's the same thing that happened 50 years ago. So this has been going on where they really started doing research in the United States 50 years ago, right around in mid 50s. So to get handprints, footprints, and casts, plaster Paris casts, gee, that's getting kind of old. We must move beyond that, and the only way to do that isn't to sit at home waiting for someone to call you to say in the back of their farm they found a footprint. And you go out there and you feel like you've just climbed Mount Everest. You found a footprint. Well, you didn't. Somebody else did, but you take credit for it and all of this stuff because you're the researcher. But so what? I mean, so what? What does it prove? We've got all these casts now. What do we get from them? Just more casts. So people need to go out, researchers need to go out there and find out what's out there. And what I found, maybe the Batsquatch, the flying Sasquatch type, it could easily either be literally from a vortex, coming through a vortex from another dimension where it lives, and it's just visiting here, or it's a genetically engineered Sasquatch that they're experimenting with, ETs are experimenting with, and to see what happens if they put wings on it. I don't know. In a latest report coming from the Track Record, which is a newsletter that's put out of Oregon, they mentioned somebody seeing a Sasquatch with 3 eyes. So, and there were comments in there by the editors kind of laughing at it, and saying it's pretty much a hoax, that somebody made it up. But how does he know? He's being subjective, and there's so much subjective data collecting going on in this field that it's horrible. And so when someone like myself, who has the academic credentials, and who's done the work, and one time I stayed in the field going to different areas for 2 years. These guys go out for 1 week vacation or for the weekend, and just to look for a few tracks to camp out, and they bring beer with them and stuff like that. Many of them do, and has nothing to do with research. How are we ever going to progress in this field if people don't make themselves vulnerable by simply, going out to a very isolated area and stay there for long periods of time and without guns or cameras? It's just to experience something, because they know you have a gun, they know you've got a camera, so they won't get near you. So you might as well have a megaphone announcing that you're there. So you would never go deer hunting and do some crazy things like a megaphone thing, but that's, analogously speaking, that is really what people are doing. They are unwittingly telepathing to the Sasquatch, unconsciously, saying, I'm coming with a gun to look for you. So obviously when they get out there, they're not there. Hunters run across them at times. You say, wait a minute, what about these hunters? Well, the hunters aren't looking for Bigfoot. They're not thinking of Bigfoot. So they can run across them from time to time. And most hunters that run across them will not shoot them.
In 1981, I was contacted by a woman who I had gone to school with 15 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And she and I had these paranormal experiences. She contacts me, she says, Andy, I got a message from your dead father. He says you have a protector. And that's it. And I was left with this big mystery. That I've trying to solve ever since. What does this mean? Does that mean that my dad is watching over me? Or is my dad referring to something bigger? And when you mentioned the word protector, it triggered something, and I thought maybe Kewaunee knows what that means, or would have an insight into what that might mean.
Some people, from what I understand, that have come into the human body have souls that are from other planets. And these are people who are eccentric, or who are extremely bright, or who are into different kinds of research and have different things to offer people. And sometimes they're not educated, but they're bright, very bright people that seem to give a different point of view all the time to their family members, neighbors, and friends, and people they work with, that seem to change people's lives. So it's when this happens, there is a certain, often these people eventually turn into contactees or abductees, mostly contactees. And they've been told that they've been watching them their whole lives, like they've told me this. So I feel that the ETs and the Sasquatch are protecting me, because they've told me this several times, and there's experiences I'm not going to talk about that were super critical, that very unusual, that happened, that had to do with them protecting me.
This is my idea, that the Garuda, the Mothman, the flying Bigfoot, may be a tree. It may be a form of tree being that can shift back and forth from tree to being, or that uses the tree as a camouflage, or can look like a tree, because that was my experience. I saw it coming out of a tree, and I've run into several accounts now where people have seen it act like a tree and go back. Its wings come out, it goes back to looking like a tree. Sort of like the
what
wall.
What if it's a shapeshifter?
It's a shapeshifter.
Maybe it's just a... Now, I've had people tell me who've done very little Sasquatch research that they've seen the tracks change from Sasquatch tracks in the snow to a deer tracks. And I've had deer 3 times standing the exact place where Lynn saw the Sasquatch out here. So I'm not going to claim it was, because I have no proof. I need, let's say, not proof is generally empirical proof, which I don't have and never will, but evidence to say that they're absolutely shapeshifters. But there's one woman who had experiences where the white Sasquatch that was 7 foot tall was coming around all the time, and she had a hole in one side of her house and the other, instead of a cellar, and you had to crawl. It's a crawl space of about 2 or 2.5 feet above the ground. So you had to get down there and crawl, and the Sasquatch went underneath there and came out the other side in a matter of seconds. Maybe 10 seconds or something. And the hole that it came out of, she says, was so small. But when she looked out the window, there was this huge creature there. How could it all of a sudden do that? Unless maybe it shapeshifted. I don't know that, again. But that's another possibility, and that we must look at and not laugh at, not make fun of. We must stay objective on this, and because there's something going on that implies that shapeshifting may be what's going on here, and it may be the answer to the Batman, Sasquatch kind of thing, or other things. I just don't know.
So when we were out camping, I just saw this tree, and it just had this kind of it had this Garuda essence about it, and I wanted to spend some time, sort of sketching as my communing way, and I wanted to spend some time communing with that tree. That figure. So I sat down and I put this together, and this is what came out.
I just, to look at it, I think it's tremendous.
Well, thank you.
We were in Quito, Ecuador, and my heart began, and since we were at about 9,600 feet, my heart began to beat irregularly. When I went to bed, it was still beating irregularly. I was laying on my side, and I could hear the heart beating, so I rolled on my back so I wouldn't hear it. And after doing so, it wasn't long before, looking up at the ceiling, I saw 3 figures. One was a shaman. 2 others were dressed in Peruvian Indian garb, so I assume that's who they were. And after looking at them for a while, they were looking down at me, and then the shaman turned to the two Peruvian Indians and nodded his head, and when he did, they all went away, and my heart began to beat very regularly.
Did you get a telepathic message of any kind?
No, they just looked at one another.
Did you get a sense of something at all? Anything?
No, just that the shaman looked at the two men, and I don't know why, and when he nodded his head, to me they all just disappeared. But at that moment, my heart began to beat regularly. I told it to my doctor, my cardiologist, and he said it was very interesting, but he didn't know what to do with it.
I was asleep in my parents' house in Lubbock, Texas, and I was awakened one night by lights in my window. The door was open, and the first thing I remember is I sat up in my bed and looked towards the open door. The room was dark, the hallway was dark, and looking around the corner of the room was an entity of the classic oval eyes looking underneath a dark cowl. The only thing I could see was actually the head, but I could perceive the body behind the image, and at that point I didn't see anything else, but yet I knew somebody was in my room and felt someone walking towards the bunk beds. Now my room opened up onto a courtyard, and there was a street light across the way, so I could often have very good, you could see what was in the room because of the light from across the street.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't really see anything in the room, but I knew it was there, and the bunk beds swayed. There was a ladder towards the end, and I felt, the bunk bed shift as if someone was crawling with a ladder. I mean, obviously, you know what that feels like, and I couldn't see anything at that point, but the covers moved. The
Covers moved too?
You could feel the weight on the mattress of the bunk bed, and at that point I don't really think about anything else. I just keep thinking, and then I'm just in my room, and trying to figure out what happened.
No, and it's over. So there's like a skip of time, or
and then
something.
I went to sleep.
And then you went to sleep.
Did you sleep a really long time?
I slept until the morning. It was a normal day after that.
Any changes in your life after that? Soon after that?
Yeah, how'd you feel when you got up the next morning?
Well, I thought about it all the next day. I thought about it all the next day. I mean, obviously, I was captivated by this event. It just happened to me.
Yeah.
Went to school.
Did you think it was real?
Didn't your dad mention something about it at the breakfast table?
Well, that's right.
No, it wasn't a breakfast table. It was a dinner table. It was a dinner table that same night after the following morning. I had gone to school. My dad had gone to work. My dad mentioned something strange happened to me last night. And I said, really?
Really?
Me too. So he said that he was awakened. He was awakened in his room with the feeling that somebody was in the room. He laid in his bed in an awakened state, but not really moving, just trying to perceive what was around him.
Mm-hmm.
And he felt that this he felt that something was directly above him. And he reached up and he grabbed it, and he felt something move away from him. And then he chased it out of the room, then went back to bed. He felt it another time that night.
So it like touched him somehow? Made contact?
It was touching him. It came to him.
And I had that same experience too. And when I had my experience, though, I still don't know what it is. There's an explanation that maybe it was something that was actually nothing. But after everything happened, I could always just say that, maybe it was this.
Do you think this thing runs in families? Because you're married to Randy's sister.
Well, then that would not be by blood.
But do you think maybe people come together and or maybe perhaps get married because they have these experiences that somehow bring them
Clan
together?
of the abductee, yeah.
Or do you think it's just so common that everyone experience, that you could almost go to just about any married couple?
I think it's a random sample thing. Yeah, I don't think it runs down bloodlines like vampires or Mothman. Ooh.
I think people may tend to be attracted to others that may experience realities that they do.
There you go. Yeah, I'll go there.
It beats the hell out of me why I fell asleep. I can't imagine why I did it. There was no natural event in my house that night, and I went back to sleep. It changed the notion that there's a normal. And paranormal is a freaking sliding scale. Otherness is just other than what you see in front of you. There's a whole world behind it. There's just the whole other.
Does it bleed over? Do you think there are rules, measurable rules that govern the way it bleeds over into the not otherness, the normal?
No, I think all things have their own intentions.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things I understood most about these things after they came in the room that night was that there was they had their own intentions. I think they didn't ever come back because my dad and I woke up that night. If we would have
slept through it,
they would have been back again.
Mm-hmm.
There were hooded figures that came into the room of both my brother and my father. And that's all they seem to remember.
Dad remembers waking up and seeing someone at the end of the bed. And he woke up because he felt like someone was staring at him. And he said, "What do you want?" And they didn't say anything. He described it as a hooded figure with just a black space here with red.
Remember the first time I heard my dad talk about visitors, and I thought about it for a long time before I tried to figure out exactly what it might have been, and it seems like
were you alive at the time, or
no? I was not alive at the time.
But since then, you've sort of
I'd heard the story many times, and probably when I was about 12 or 13, I started. This is back in the days when the internet was not really there yet, but they had bulletin boards, and there was a bulletin board system that would have alien stories. Plus, I just read Communion by Whitney Strieber, which my dad was into, because of course he's an alien phenomenon. Anyway, I kind of got the impression from Communion and from the stories I heard about my dad and my brother, it was a humanoid figure, and it seems like, why would aliens be humanoid, right? Why should they be humanoid? Because they're humans, man, because they're time travelers, and they're at a different point in the future when their gene pool is no longer big enough, and they have to come back and get fresh genes. fresh DNA.
That's the story that one hears a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be it. And otherwise, it doesn't seem to make much sense. I mean, aliens could be any sort of life form whatsoever.
Well, actually, I guess Mom was there.
But she doesn't remember it.
She was there in the bed next to Dad, and he asked her, did she see it? She was like, see what? Okay, and they go back to bed. So then Dad goes to work, and Mom stays at home with Randy and has her day. And then whenever Mom is with Randy during the day, Mom said that Randy asked her about who was in the house last night. And she had Randy describe it. Then when Dad got home, Mom said to Dad, Randy had this weird thing happen. And they had the same description of the entity. The only thing that's ever happened to me, I have seen a very strange green light. We were traveling, I was traveling with a friend of mine, and we were coming back from the beach in an area outside of Seattle here. Renton, is that right, I think? Is that a suburb of here?
There have been some sightings in Renton this year.
Really? Well, we were in Renton, and we were driving down the highway, and all of a sudden, a beautiful, little green light started following. Oh, that's giving me goosebumps. Started following our car, just along the side of our car, and then it just shot off. And I was looking at it just in awe, and this was, probably like 3 seconds, 4 seconds that it came along, followed the car, and then shot off. And I looked at my friend and said, and I looked at him, and he said, did you see what I saw? And I was like, I don't know, I saw something really weird. And he described it as a light, and it was a green light that followed
about 5 or 6 years ago. There was a green fireball that was seen traveling down the interstate toward where you were.
Oh my gosh, that is so weird. This is a huge universe and a massive amount of space.
So why would an alien race take an interest in the human race? And if they did, wouldn't they just want to?
Well, out of curiosity, why would we take an interest in protists or single-celled organisms and start looking at them under the microscope? Why would we take an interest in something strange to us and we study it?
I remember as a child that I have distinct memories of flying as a kid.
Memories of dreams of flying?
No.
Yeah, this is a weird thing.
No, I remember flying.
Flying from the
and not just flying like like flying over the countryside, like flying in my courtyard from my wall to my roof, and I kind of made like a dipped, like a curved little trip across the way. It was like I was on a string or something, like I was tethered. And
do you remember what happened
I still have dreams about flying, and it seems like it's like if I can puff out air underneath me, that I can somehow get high enough up. And it's definitely an effort thing, but I still dream about flying.
I don't think
that has anything to do with aliens.
I think that's fun.
And it is possible, definitely, that what I remember it might have just been a dream. Yeah.
I think that we share a certain energy.
Have you shared dreams?
No, but things have happened before when Tony and I were in a conversation and somebody was asking him questions, and I thought I knew the answer to them in my head, and he said the wrong answer, the answer that I had in my head. He said the answer. And then he was like, what? No, that's not right. I don't know why I just said that. And then he went on through the conversation, and the lady asked him another one, like what's your sign? And I'm thinking it's Virgo. And he pops out, Virgo. And he goes, what? No, it's Leo.
Sure.
And I was thinking Virgo in my head. That kind of freaked me out. The other things that I've had happen to me were, I think, supernatural, were having to do with ghosts or dead people, or something like that.
What were some of those?
And they're mostly having to do with my father.
After he died?
right after he died. Well, after he died, not just necessarily right after. One of the things happened right after he died. Tony and I went down to the crash site where he died with my mother, and we were, standing out there in the field, and I had this huge feeling. I mean, this overwhelming feeling of being lost and not knowing where my father was and worrying where he was and if he was okay. And we got back into the car and started driving back to Lubbock, and I was just asking, the world, Dad, where are you? Do you still exist? Are you going to be around anymore? And I saw him in front of me. I mean, I had my eyes closed, and I saw him. And he said, "I love you, Kate. Everything's going to be okay," and hugged me. And I felt his warmth. And it was cold outside. I was cold when we got in the car. And I felt his warmth, and I felt the shirt that he was wearing. I knew what shirt he was wearing. I felt that. I know that he came to me. And I've had a couple of other times where I felt like I really wanted to talk to Dad, and just, I was being alone, standing by a fire and looking up the trees. And my dad had told me about tree spirits. And so I thought about tree spirits, and I thought about my dad, and I just asked, Dad, are you around me anymore? Are you still here? Because this was, 3 years after he had died. And all of a sudden, the wind in the bottle that I was holding made a exactly whenever I'm asking, Dad, do you still exist? I wish there was some way we could talk, or that I would know.
What did he say about tree spirits? Because I'm coming up with some things about trees in this research. Yeah.
He wrote me a letter whenever I was at summer camp, and I was really depressed. I had written home and cried, I want to go home, and there's like tears in the ink, and I'm like, this is not water, these are real tears. I wanted to go home. And so I think he was trying to console me and maybe keep my mind busy, but he really believed in tree spirits, and he told me in this letter about tree spirits, and that they were ancient beings, and that they communicated, and he asked if I would say hello to a certain tree of his in a certain forest. And Randy saw Dad. Dad came to Randy like he came to me. Randy was the first one in Seattle to know that Dad had died, and he got a phone call at work, and immediately he went home and wanted to meditate. And so he sat down and calmed himself, and immediately Dad was there. And he said, Randy, what's going on? And Dad was very confused. He said, all I remember is spinning. And at this point in time, Randy didn't know that my dad had died in a car crash where he flipped 2.5 times over. But that's what Dad said to him, all I remember is spinning. And Randy said, well, Dad, you died. And Dad felt very relieved. He said he was very relieved then, and that he was like, oh, that's what happened. And okay, all right, he had the answer. And he was ready to go on. And Randy describes a light that he saw. And, he described it to me as the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. All colors and nothing, all combined into one. And, all colors,
A clear light, is that what you're saying? Or
I don't know exactly how to describe the light, because Randy's the one that saw it, and he said that it's indescribable. Okay. But that it was the most beautiful thing he's ever seen in his life.
Right in the room, in his mind?
Yeah, in the vision, here's Dad with him and a light in the distance. And Dad wanted to rush onto it, and Randy said, no, Dad, you've got to stick around. There's some people that might need some help, with this, and we might need you to be here for a while. And Dad said, oh, okay. And I don't know exactly how it ended, but Randy ended up coming straight over to Karen's house, and telling Karen that Dad had died. And Randy watched the 2 kids, and Karen, was very upset, of course, and went upstairs to her room. and laid down and started trying to calm herself and meditate. And when she did that, Dad was there. And he said, that he loved her. And Karyn was confused. She was like, Dad, why? Did you kill yourself? What happened? And he said, no, Karyn, it was just an accident. It was just something that wasn't meant to be that happened. And, Karyn, I guess, was a little bit, consoled by that fact that he didn't go off the road on his own. And Dad said that he loved her, and I think, said some other things to her, and then he said, you give that boy a hug for me, meaning Evan. And at that moment, Evan was coming up the stairs. Dad stuck around and came to Karyn and came to me, and has come to Tony in his dreams.
I feel like that it was something that came from me, and I feel like, I don't know, I mean, a lot of the stuff that people explain to, like, being the afterlife or, some sort of supernatural phenomena, it's just their mind compensating for things. And honestly,
Right.
I think if Dad were here, he would say the same thing, perhaps.
I don't know.
It's inexplicable. But I do know that Karyn and Randy have more psychic ability than I do. And
I don't think that.
Well, I think that they've trained it better because
believe that
they actually took the Silva mind control thing
I don't
whenever
believe that for a
in the 70s, early 70s. And I think that they know how to tap into their powers more. I think that maybe we have the power, to...
No.
Well, that's my opinion. I feel that Randy and Karyn are, they handle the supernatural and
I feel like the urge
feeling
to
spirituality
explain. I feel like
and
the
things
urge
like
to
that a lot better
explain
than
things
Tony and I
sometimes
do.
makes things come to the surface in your mind. But the alternative is really scary, and people don't like to consider the fact
That once you're
that
dead, you're dead, and there's
perhaps
nothing.
everything means nothing,
Yes.
and there is no real afterlife, and that's
Which makes a lot more sense than anything else.
But that's a
most of the
very
time.
human thing to try and make meaning out of all this,
I have an experience that involves Silva, whether it's paranormal.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what you would call it, but I was in Silva when I was 8, and my parents took me and my brother. I was 8, he was 6, and it was in the early 70s, and we went through the whole course together. They didn't have a children's course at that time; it was all adult. It was designed for adults, and so we just went along and did everything the grown-ups did. And one of the last things you do in the course is, I think they call it doing readings on people. I forget exactly what they call it, but they give you a name and an age of a person, and your job is to, and that there's something physically wrong with these people, and your job is to diagnose what it is. And so I had a name and an age on a person, and you go into your relaxed state, and I wasn't getting anything. Nothing. I wasn't feeling anything. And so one of the techniques that they use is they tell you to pretend like you're putting on the head or the body of the person. And so whenever I did that, I was like, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm putting on her head. And I put on her head. And I really felt like I was this other person. I wasn't saying things like, this person is very sad, this person is, having mental problems, anything like that. Instead it was, I am really, really sad. I'm in a dark place. There's no windows here. Nobody is coming to help me, and I just felt desperately, desperately depressed and sad, and started crying, and it was very intense. It was really intense, and to me, as an 8-year-old, this is what they told me to do, right? They told me to diagnose this person, so that's what I did. And I was kind of conscious of people coming around while I was doing it. And the instructor said, okay, I think that's enough. You should take her head off now. So I took her head off. And it was like, okay, now I'm back to myself. I wasn't ever, it was like we were two people at one time. It was really weird. It was very, very unusual. I've never experienced anything like that again. But everyone, it was strange afterwards how people reacted to me, because I had actually, it was like everybody, you've gone through this whole program, right? You're going through it, I think it's like 6 weeks long. And at the end, I actually did what, I actually had this experience that they were going along believing or, trying to achieve or do, but it freaked them out. It was really freaky because
it freaked out the instructor.
It freaked out everybody, not the instructor. I don't think he said things like, "Well, you had an interesting experience," or, I something special happened, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but people looked at me like, "What the heck was that?" Because it was, I don't know what it looked like from the outside, but I know how it felt to me, and it was.
Have you
different.
had other experiences like that?
Yeah, actually, one time I did.
Go ahead.
Now that you mention that, my mother-in-law.
What year was this?
This was 1991, so I was well grown up by then. And her sister had died the previous year in the spring, and like 6 months later, her sister's husband had met a new woman and was marrying her a few months after that. So it had been within a whole span of a year. Her sister died, her brother-in-law met this other woman and married her, and I was at the wedding, and I really felt like I learned something about her that day, because I was sitting next to her, and I was just, I was there. I didn't have any, I never knew this sister. I didn't have any emotional connection. I didn't have any feelings of sadness about, other than, another passing and that kind of thing. I didn't have any real emotional investment in her. So I was just sitting there watching the wedding happen, and all of a sudden I got a wave of emotion, and I felt kind of like I was her, like I was Elizabeth, and I felt, I heard a voice saying, my sister. She was, sorry. I really felt what she was feeling at that moment. I knew I did. And I looked over at her, and she's just sitting there, and I thought, wow. Because I had just met her the year before. I didn't really know her very well, and I thought, wow, I just learned something about her today, about what kind of control she has over herself, which I obviously don't. I've got no emotional control whatsoever, but that was real. That was something real. I've got no clue.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have any explanation for it, but I just know that whenever things like that happen, they're real. And we don't, as far as science understands it right now, there's no physical reason, no physically measurable kind of explanation for that. We can't quantify it. I'm not saying it's not quantifiable, but that it's right now we can't.
Well, it's interesting that you've gone into the healing arts as you've gotten older. I mean, you were asked at a young age to do to intuit someone medically, and you did in the most profound way.
Oh, I never said what was wrong with her, did I?
What was wrong with her?
She was in a mental institution. Yeah, she was in a mental institution for severe depression, and she had attempted suicide. So maybe they shouldn't have given that person to an 8-year-old, do you think? But
they obviously were doing some strange things in the Silva program.
Yeah, they still do that.
The government will spray us and feed us with anything that we allow them to. And they'll package it up into something that looks a little different, but it's really the same thing. It's really, pardon the stupid trite expression, but it's really the sheep in a wolf costume, or is it the other way around? You know what I'm trying to say? Wolves in sheep's costumes. See, I knew I had it twisted around.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, do you have an issue like that you want to get out today? Sasquatch rights, civil rights for Sasquatch, they need to be recognized as an existing being. How about
There is a real movement that exists of people, and it's just not fun anymore. There is something really underlying going on, and I believe it has to do with our weather conditions and our weather patterns. It has to do with our economy. It has to do with our changing health. It's all interrelated, Andy.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you've been put
Tapping
in a
into our
pot.
subconscious.
You've been put in a pot, and the water temperature is slowly rising. You don't realize it, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And then when you realize it, it's hard to bring it back down because it's already boiling in there. It's already festering.
Yeah. Where are we heading right now in our country with all this war on terrorism and
It's just going to get worse. It's not going to get better because we don't understand the Islamic people. We don't understand their religion or their thinking or their culture within different countries like Iraq. And people are saying, well, we didn't do anything to them. Why are they getting hostages? Let them go. And of course, they're not looking at it that way. An American is an American, and an American is a fair game during times of war when they don't want anything to do with this period. And we had no right to be over there. Starting at age 12 to 16, I read every book in our library, and we had a fantastic library in our town where I was raised, and every book on animals you could imagine, and I studied them. I just didn't read them. I studied animals from all over the world. And I was raised hunting, fishing, trapping, and was an accomplished taxidermist by age 16 as well. So I knew animals, and I used to have a zoologist come up from the University of Massachusetts when I was 15 years old, and in my biology class, and he would after class for 2 hours, he would drill me and ask me questions about different animals that he knew nothing about and my perspective on them. So like I said, I was very precocious and was flowing actually with the oneness of nature. I had a lot of wild animals as pets. I had falcons and crows and a ferret, South African ferret. I had a raccoon that I call Mr. Jinx that was given to me by an animal trainer that said this animal is vicious. I'll never be able to train him. He has no potential at all. He used to train bears and everything as well. And he says, I says, where is he? I'll take him off your hands. I was 16 years old, and he showed me, went in the barn, and he opened the door, and had a collar on him and everything, and he opened the stall. Actually, he was in a horse stall. When he opened the door, the raccoon went up and brought his paws up and just screamed and backed into the corner, ready to leap on anybody and lash out. And within 1 month, I had him sitting in my lap and feeding him out of my hand, and I named him Mr. Jinx. And it's a part of who I am. Much of what I do is Native American, and I started out as an applied anthropologist, working with Indian people and doing health planning work, and later social service planning. So you cleanse yourself and you meditate and you go out and fast. They do this. They lay tobacco to the 4 directions, as I do as well, and was taught because I studied with several medicine people. I knew Rolling Thunder out in Nevada. I spent some time with him twice, and we used to talk on the phone. In fact, he was going to write the introduction to my book. And he told me that he was on a train at night, on a freight train, because that's how he made his living, out in the desert, and a spaceship landed, and he got out and stopped the train because the other engineers were sleeping in the caboose, so they weren't paying attention. He was the only one that was running the train as an engineer, and so he stopped it in the middle of the desert and got out, and the door opened up of the ship and came out, and he stood around talking to them. Just last week, a guy that I buy my my cordwood from. And I went over there to see if he had some cordwood, for later this month and to deliver and so forth. And there were two other guys there, and we just started talking, and I just mentioned Bigfoot, and one of them said, oh yeah, I had a Bigfoot experience, and told me what he saw. And then the other guy sitting across the way, which was the woodcutter's 34-year-old son, and nobody knew either. They never discussed this. He brought it up and said, oh, I saw a Sasquatch too. I had an encounter. So here, two people, one didn't know the other one had the experience in the same room. Just because I brought it up, there were only three people sitting there. So two out of those three had a Bigfoot encounter. So I believe that probably about 1% of all sightings are reported. That's my feeling. Could be 5% or whatever, but I think it's probably very close to 1%. So there's a lot of stuff going on out there that no one's discussing, there's a lot to be gleaned just in the general public.
We were just speaking about Heaven's Gate, you and I, and Art Bell, and Art Bell had been accused of publicizing this rumor that there was a UFO behind this comet, and that the Heaven's Gate people took that as a sign and then killed themselves. However, my theory is that since the Heaven's Gate cult suicide occurred on a Wednesday, and they waited until Friday to put it on the air, that there was some media manipulation, in the sense that Friday was the day that the Martin Luther King family came forward and said that they had looked at all the information and they felt like James Earl Ray was innocent, and that it was the government that had killed their father. And I just sensed that was such a big story. I mean, that's the kind of thing that could cause riots. That they had to come up, they had to find something, some sensationalist, dark story to throw in with that King press conference. And literally, I remember this, and I taped it. They went back and forth on the channels between King and this Heaven's Gate thing, and I think it totally convinced people that this King stuff was loony because of the association of the two. Do you remember that at all?
I don't, but certainly there's a lot of, I feel anyway, there's a lot of manipulation by the government, and that could very possibly be true. I just don't know. When I inherited a small bit of money, I went for several years in and out of the wilderness, freeing myself up, living on sardines and gathering wild foods, and living on tuna fish and those kinds of things, in order to stay out there for weeks and months at a time. Sometimes I had people bring me food, or I would leave the forest in 3 or 4 weeks, gather new supplies, and come back in again to the same area, because I wanted to continue to make myself vulnerable as possible. No guns, no cameras, nothing threatening. Gathering food like the Bigfoot do, studying the environment like the Bigfoot do, being very meditative. So these are the tools. This is the way field work should be done, and this is the way it's successful. People with emotional problems that are researchers will have a hard time with this, and that's okay. They can have fun. I had fun when I was in the Boy Scouts. So this kind of thing going on, there are many different levels of research, and I've experimented with this, and this is the best that I can do. How do I know which areas to go in? I'm a master dowser now. I've done work, I can prove it, finding missing persons, finding criminals for the state of Oregon. In 1984, I found the most wanted criminal in the state of Oregon, working for the state police and for the district attorney, who is now a judge, Judge William Laswell. So I have letters of reference from him and what I did, I found 3 out of 3 oil wells. I found 119 water wells for people. I found all kinds of animals in nature. And this is how I can find out where the Bigfoot people are, by dowsing on a map. I use a picture of the Patterson Sasquatch. It's a real Sasquatch. I asked a Sasquatch in July of 1985, and he said that's a real picture of a Sasquatch, of one of their people that got caught off guard. I've never seen a real one since. All of them are fake, every one that I've ever seen after that. I mean, they've healed me. A female shamaness came to me when I herniated a disc in my lower back and I was limping, and she came into my room. I saw there was a ship by my house, a spaceship. I telepathed and asked if it would come and heal me, and I talked and talked and talked to it for 10 or 15 minutes and repeated it over and over again, and they said they heard me. That's all they said. They didn't answer, they didn't say they would do anything, but the beings in the ship, of course, simply have to ask the Sasquatch, or if there's any Sasquatch on board or in the area, if they would do this. If they don't feel like doing it, they're not going to do it, because they're very independent. And I thought as soon as I went to bed that they would somebody would be there. In fact, I didn't expect a Sasquatch, but 35 minutes went by, and all of a sudden a female Sasquatch appeared right in front of me there. I was in bed, I turned to my left, and there she was, and she was a shamaness, and she held up her hand and it hit me with some beam just from her hand and went up and down my spine, and I wasn't able to make long steps because I was afraid I would re-injure my herniated disc. So I was limping. I was having a hard time getting around. And the next morning I woke up, I was completely well. I walked normal and was completely fine. My research has been very fruitful, but when I go to share it, like when I did it over the Bigfoot Central, it's a radio station out of Ohio, I thought that I'd get a flood of calls from different researchers because the Bigfoot researchers listen to this. That's one of the things that it's about. And they still don't want to know. They're still burying their heads in the sand. And they're still, and this isn't a put down, it's just an observation, because I'm friendly with everyone. The idea is that they feel it's guilt by association if they contact me. They don't want people to know that they're contacting me, kind of thing, so they just assume not because of their own reputations. But these people bring fear, and they don't understand that they're projecting unwittingly in their unconscious mind their fears out into the forest. And this is pushing the Bigfoot away. And the paradox is they look like animals or monsters when inside, as long as you're kind to them, as long as you're non-threatening to them, they would never hurt you. As corny or as airy-fairy as it may sound, if a person meditates, and some of these people, need to, like Renee DeHinden, used to send me, I still have the letters, awful letters threatening me and stuff because of what I discovered. I scientifically discovered and documented. And so he needs, of course, he's passed on, and bless him, but he's needed psychological counseling to release all this anger and all this violence and everything in him. This is not arrogance speaking here. It's simply reality. And, I would work with anyone or train them because I'm not trying to just steal the spotlight. I'm into truth. So, as Margaret Mead said, that we're, and I guess I have to paraphrase her here, but all the advancements that they ever found, in science were coming from all these oddball areas of anomalies that science did not want to look at. Up in Vancouver a few years ago at the International Sasquatch Symposium, John Kirk, who's a researcher in Canada, a very intelligent individual, a very fine person, but on the other hand, very narrow. And he was trying to tell me what telepathy was about and telling me that I was wrong. And I asked him, what experiences he's had. Of course, he's had absolutely none. He doesn't believe in telepathy, but he's telling me what it's all about and even arguing with me. It was all the statements he made were fallacious. He was totally in left field, but I've experienced them, every year since this time. I can't apologize for that. I can't apologize for something that's real. So we need to revamp the scientific paradigm to include this elusive phenomena, because this is a part of universal reality, not just my reality. They're a different kind of humanoid. They're not hominids, they're humanoids. Right now in Texas, I've been contacted. They're feeding the 6 Sasquatch that are coming in. This is up on the Oklahoma border, and they report to me every week what's going on. They're leaving sketches out there, and they're pointing to try to communicate more with them. And now the telepathy just started with the woman that lives at the edge of this wilderness area, or semi-wilderness. So I told them this, and of course they didn't believe me at first, these researchers, and now they're all reading my book, The Psychic Sasquatch, and their telepathy has started, and they have sketches of, and even they're writing English. It's poorly done, but she's leaving blankets and all kinds of food and things out for them, her and her husband. And where do they learn this? Well, I'm a little skeptical, so I'm probably later this summer, or most likely this fall, will be down there, because I'm trying to determine just how real this is. Like, where do they learn English? Out in eastern Tennessee, at the edge of the Smoky Mountains. The Sasquatch is sending messages back and forth to me. I'm a master herbalist and a holistic health consultant, and I'm a research scientist in the field of alternative medicine. And doctors refer people to me and so on. And I've educated doctors. They've come and studied with me. So this Sasquatch that they labeled Bo, his name, refers to me as the medicine man, and gives me information all the way from Tennessee, and says, tell Kewaunee the medicine man that. And we're back and forth. And I told him I'd be out there in October to visit with him, and I asked to be taken by him. And he said, well, I'm not sure, but if I take you, you're going to have to leave everything you know behind and come in a childlike way so you can understand us better. And I want to be taken by them. So I have no fear whatsoever, because I've had so many experiences. And I told him, what do you want? Big watermelon, or what does he want for food that I'll bring him some gifts and so on, which I do to many different clans of Sasquatch around the U.S. when I'm moving around. When I saw this ship, I telepathed to it, and I asked for help. I wanted more money for research. I wanted these kinds of things, and just to see what they would say. I didn't know what their response would be, and they indicated to me telepathically that they heard me and that they would respond. So I went back in the house and went to bed. And the next morning I woke up, and there was one of these red stones by the sink. And this really baffled me, this little gemstone. And I thought, where could this come from? And I looked around and see if it fell from someplace. And just me and my black lab Comanche was living in the place. So, I keep everything clean, and that was all cleaned out, the counter space, and this was sitting right there. So strangely enough, I just blew it away and said, well, that can't be very much. I don't know where this came from, but, I pushed it aside. The next night, I went to bed and woke up the next morning. There were 2 of them sitting there, side by side. Now, this really got my attention, because there's no one that can come into that place, because I have my dog there. How do they get in? How do they go through a locked door? So then the 3rd night, I woke up the next morning. There were 3 of these red gemstones sitting there. And now I said, now I know what's going on. That they apported. The word apportation simply means that an object came from another dimension and materialized. Now there's little vortices that can be produced apparently, from beings that live in this parallel dimension. And Sai Baba in India, for example, he can create vortices in his nose, in his mouth, in his ears, in jewelry, and different things can come out through these vortices just by him thinking about it, because he is such of a high spirit or spiritual being that he has access to those things, just like the Sasquatch, for example. I've been made fun of without people understanding what's going on. They don't understand quantum physics. They don't understand interdimensionalism. They don't understand the string theory. Look up Dr. Brian Greene and the string theory. It was in November, one of the November issues, 2003 in Scientific American. That's one of them. I read about it back in 1986. So this information is out there. Read Stephen Hawking stuff. He's a physicist. All these people are not just sitting around. They've got information that can be integrated into the Sasquatch phenomena and into the research. But, you know, most people, even like Lauren Coleman, for example, is, educated, I don't know if it's sociology or whatever, that he works at a university in Maine, but it doesn't make him know everything. For example, he doesn't understand the paranormal. He doesn't understand quantum physics. And I'm not a physicist, but I'm saying I understand the dynamics enough to plug it into what's going on with the Sasquatch, because I've had enough interdimensional experiences. There's so much information out there that the Russians scientists have been working on with telepathy. It's nothing new. If you looked into the secret government, the United States, the CIA has been using psychics for about 35 years. It's nothing new. Nothing new. But people who are not educated, like Lauren Coleman and many others, that are good people trying to solve this, but when the ego gets in the way, they don't go anywhere. They get on a treadmill. So if they educate themselves, they'd come across a whole new area that they could plug in, and they would advance in this region of Bigfoot research. And so I encourage these people. I've never met Lauren Coleman, but I'm sure he's a fine person, but he's not educated enough. And he needs to educate himself. And I say this to all of the researchers. There was a PhD physical anthropologist. She was basically a primatologist, and she approached me at a university after hearing me speak, telling me that she had, when she was studying monkeys in East Africa, while she was doing her doctoral work, that she experienced telepathy from the monkeys and was in a state of shock over it. And she ran back and told her professor she was working under, you'll never believe this, but this is what happened. And guess what? He didn't believe it. And he blew up and started screaming at her. He says, "You call yourself a scientist? None of this stuff is scientific. This is not real, what you're talking about." And really chastised her. I mean, how does he know? He doesn't know. The thing is, he doesn't know anything about it. It's about time, There's nothing wrong with me or this other well-educated person. There's nothing wrong with this government official. Him and his wife experienced the Sasquatch and the telepathy at the same time. And then the following day, they experienced a spaceship, and then in the same area. I'm talking about just a short ways away. And plus, there were several ETs dressed up, men in black, with black suits on, regular suits, with chalky skin and looked very anemic looking, and walked up and talked to them in the car, and it freaked them out, really freaked them out. So, what's this about? Why can't people discuss things that are absolutely real to them and they've experienced it like I have many times? And the public is watching too much television. They cannot distinguish between science fiction and what's really going on in universal reality. And some of the worst people to deal with on this matter that have no objectivity whatsoever are the scientists, the mainstream scientists. I've written to scientists in China and in Russia that are experiencing these things, and they're reporting the same things. It's all over the world. Australia the same way. I just had two researchers in Australia contact me and say, your book, The Psychic Sasquatch and Their UFO Connection, is exactly what's going on here. You're way ahead of your time. And they're so happy, and they're publishing their own book on it. 10 years or 15 years, they're going to look back and say, you know, Kewaunee Lapsaritis here was right on. He had done all the work by going out in the field and, you know, by himself and made all the sacrifices to try to do this. I honor them by not wanting to shoot them and by telling other people, don't be so foolish by trying to do that, because guess what? A male will kill you. But guess what? You break into someone's home or come onto their property and try to hurt them, you might get yourself killed too by someone, a regular person. You know, they don't want anyone trying to hurt them. So you have to put yourself in the Sasquatch's, I can't say shoes, but in their space and kind of think of what they are trying to do, which is nothing to us. They're not trying to do anything to us. And if you perturb them, they will kill your cattle and those kinds of things. But if they also occasionally do grab a pig or kill cattle because they're hungry. And guess what? When the Native American people were, you know, when all their land was taken away from them, all the buffalo was shot, they killed an occasional cow out there. Why? Because they didn't have anything to eat anymore. This is genocide. It's the same way in South America. They clear the jungle, and then they say, what are these Indians doing on my property? Well, wait a minute. The Indians have been hunting on this land for 1,000 years perhaps, or maybe 5,000 years. So what do you mean on whose property? They're just crossing over, and they're hunting. They're not doing anything to anyone, and some of these Indians were shot, even in today's world. I'm not talking about 100 years ago. They were killing Indians the last time I knew, back in the 70s and 80s. So while I was talking on the phone, 3 Sasquatch appeared in my kitchen, and they come in my place all the time. They have for 25 years, but they are, the only word I know is astral project, that they astral project themselves. That is, they leave their physical body somewhere else, and their soul selves, they soul travel, another word for it, into the anybody's home, and they could monitor them, and I could see them standing there, and there were 3 of them, and they're listening in, and I was kind of concerned, because every few minutes this woman would say, oh my God, they're still going back and forth here, they're watching me, these men, and they're going to follow, most likely waiting for me to finish so they can follow me home. And it's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm afraid. So I said, just a moment, and I asked the Sasquatch telepathically if they would go to her and help her, and they said they were monitoring the conversation, and that they had no problem doing that. They said they would go over and protect her and watch over her. So I said, fine, thank you, God bless you. This is the way I talk to them. I went back onto the phone and I said, you may not believe what I'm going to tell you, but I've got to tell you, because I'm afraid for you too, what you're saying. I don't get good vibes at all in what you're telling me about these 2 men that are drunkards most of the time. I said, but there's 3 Sasquatch standing here, and I can see through them. Well, 2 days later, when we sat down to do business, a couple of hours went by, and we finished up, and I said, oh, incidentally, I have a picture here. It's actually a sketch from, it was done by a top illustrator from Walt Disney Productions for the cover of my book. And I thought I'd show you the cover, because my book will be out next month. and I started to pull it out from a big manila envelope, and she raised her voice and said, that's it, that's the man that I saw at my place that you sent to me, meaning the Sasquatch man. And I said, oh, right, I meant to ask you about that. And she says, well, I drove home, and when I drove in the driveway, I had to get out to open the gate so I could get into my place. And there, standing at the edge of the house, was a 7 to 7.5 foot Sasquatch that looked just like the one on your cover of your book. And he just turned and walked behind the house and disappeared, but I knew, he was letting me know that he was there, and he was going to do his job by protecting her. And so she went in, locked the gate, and went in the house, and she said to me that she slept all through the night. She never heard anything, but she's a light sleeper, and she slept all through the night peacefully. And she said since then, she hasn't seen the men. She sees them every day, and she had not seen them for the last 2.5 days. And of course could care less to see them, but the Sasquatch can do a telepathic hypnosis thing on people. The people don't even know they're being hypnotized from a distance, and they can make a suggestion to stay away from this woman's house, or harm may come to you. And they don't know where it's coming from. In fact, they may be sleeping at the time even. And there is such a thing, since I'm a trained hypnotherapist myself, called hypnosleep. This is what the Sasquatch can do. The Lumi Indians up there on the Canadian border here in Washington State talk about if they can throw their power at you. And of course they're talking about telepathic hypnosis and alter your mind a little bit and make you do certain things. Like stay away from them, for one thing, if you're approaching them and maybe there's some juveniles or their mate or something is close by. I've sent so far, I know 6 times, I think it might have been 7, but at least 6 times I sent to people like that for help. And they've gone and helped at my request. I mean, I feel very fortunate that they think that much of me to do that, but they tell me that I'm serving God and helping other people, and therefore they will in turn want to help me. If I'm trying to reach out to help someone that I can't do anything at the time because of distance, or it's just too intense, whatever the problem is. Because 3 times, let's see, 2 times I sent them into the hospital with the person's permission, and they healed the person who both times they were dying. So what do you say about that? I mean, I can only relate what I know and what's real in spite of what it seems. We have to look in the area of quantum physics. We have to take a look at the string theory. We have to go beyond that, because these beings have access to all these other dimensions, and they said they have access to 8 different dimensions. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, how do I know? I'm not a physicist, and maybe the physicist can't even tell me. If a mathematician and a physicist working together can come up with a mathematical paradigm that says there are 10 different dimensions in a string theory, that's very nice, but how do you access them? Well, they can't. It's just a theory, even though it looks good, and it's probably, the chances, it may be very, very real. I mean, and I hope it is. But again, the practical application of entering these dimensions, like Stargates, now they got on TV and in the movies and everything, it's similar, but there's not all this gadgetry, all the technology to go with it, that it's like right now, I could be sitting in a vortex that leads to another dimension. It's that invisible in nature. And I found several of them using L-rods. And I've dowsed on a map, and I went out there, and then when the rods cross like this, that's the place. And I told people this and brought them out to what I considered a vortex, because the Sasquatch said they were using it in this stand of timber, and so I found it. And the people didn't believe me because you can't see anything. It's an invisible door. But the Indians told me about this that I studied with. One person came with me. I showed her the door, and And she said, well, there's nothing here. And she took out a white crystal that she had and laid it on there and decided to meditate. And I went back to the tent, which was about 100 feet away, to lay out my sleeping bag and prepare and all that. And I heard a scream, and I turned around and came right back out there. And by the time I got out there, she had dropped the crystal that was at her feet. I said, what's the matter? And she says, the crystal turned a bright, kind of a scarlet red. It just glowed. And I mean, I reached in and grabbed it, and when I was pulling it out, I realized it was hot, and I dropped it, and I screamed. But she says, I can't believe it. She says, now I believe you. There's some kind of a vortex there. And so, you know, we need to measure this. It's hard to measure. How do you measure a vortex and put it inside the empirical model that's kind of conservative? It's a conservative model. It does not include, you know, all the other elusive phenomena that we're trying to deal with in the realm of the paranormal. Plantain. This is plantain. You get bit by a snake or by a wasp, anything poisonous. You can put this on, crush it up and lay it on, make a tea and drink it. I've used this 7 different times to save people's lives from blood poisoning, and 5 of them had advanced blood poisoning. I mean, all the way up their arm, somebody else all the way up their leg, and they would have been dead in the morning. And this did it beautifully. I mean, beautifully. In fact, one time I asked the person, do you spray around here? They said, no, my father had the ranch and he never sprayed. We never sprayed around the house for anything. On the lawn, nothing. So I said, good. And I went outside, and he had some huge plantain, also known as ribwort, because it's got these ribs in it. And I dug it up and made a tea from it, and crushed one of the leaves, put it around his infected finger, and within 10 minutes it drew the pain out. And of course he drank 4 cups a day. I made him do it systematically, and because his life was at stake. And sure enough, within 4 hours, the red spot, red streak that was going up his arm went back further and further till it disappeared, and he was fine. So the stuff is everywhere. You have to just, you know, people call them weeds, but that particular weed saved this person's life. It was an American Indian woman who was an herbalist, and she was driving along with a friend, and she had her window open, and a Sasquatch ran out in front of him and stood there for a second, and she hit it and went clean over it. She slammed on the brakes, so when she went over it, went bump, bump, real slow, and she thought it was dead, and she looked in the rearview mirror, and it jumped up and ran off. And with that, of course, they have similar glands like a skunk does. When it was hit, it just probably the body got relaxed because it was stunned by the force of the car, and it just emitted all of this. And her window was open, and she got it, and because she, oh God, and she breathed it all in, and she was so sick that within a week she told her family she was dying, and she tried all of her herbs and nothing worked. So she had some friends in eastern Tennessee that were having Bigfoot experiences, and they were talking to the Bigfoot telepathically, and they asked the Bigfoot, what do? You know, that it seared her lungs somehow, and it's all through her system, and she can't sleep or anything. She feels the life force, you know, leaving her, and none of the herbs worked. And this particular Sasquatch they named Bo, and Bo says, see the medicine man in Washington, see Kewaunee, I know that he will know. And so they asked me, and I said, I told him she needed Padarco, which is from the inner bark of the lapacho tree from the Amazon. And it's a powerful blood cleanser, and it cleans the liver and everything. And then the amino acid L-methionine, which pulls ammonia out of the liver and out of the body. And when she took several cups of the tea and took the methionine that first day and went to sleep that night, she slept all through the night. When she got up in the morning, she claimed she was 50 to 60% well and knew she had finally made it. It's like leaving, if you're bit by a snake or by a centipede or by a spider, if you just leave it there, it's going to hurt your body. It's going to kill you maybe. So what you do is you neutralize that poison and pull it out of the body, let it pass from the body, and that's what, the whole basis for natural healing is. So here we purified the blood and we pulled out this ammonia-like substance, and she was fine. Within 6 days, she claimed to be perfectly normal. The fall of 1980, I was talking with a woman, and she told me that just a few days before, her husband and her best friend's husband, plus a third man, all went hunting, deer hunting. And they stopped and sat on a log, and they laid their 3 rifles against the same tree, and they were eating their sandwiches and fruit and stuff, and all of a sudden they said they didn't know where it came from, but a 10-foot Sasquatch, just before they knew it, was just walking towards them. And of course my take on this, that it was there all along, and it walked up to them, and they were unbelievably scared. In fact, one of them, let go and went in his pants, defecated, and they ran. They just, ran out of there as quick as they could, and they came back the next day with 2 more men with rifles and stuff, but their rifles were smashed to pieces, and the barrels were bent into a U. Now, can you imagine? I think if you hit a tempered steel like that with a sledgehammer, I don't think it would budge it. It takes a lot. And the guns were totally useless. Most of my studying was done with a woman named Kewaunee, woman of the Northwest Wind, who was an Ojibwe medicine woman, a traditionalist, and an elder. And plus she had a PhD in ethnobotany, and that's where I started my studies in herbology. And she told me that on her island that she had seen the star people, and she had seen the ships, and there was a vortex there that they went in and out of, a doorway to another dimension. And she told me she would out picking herbs, and they would walk by her because she was near the vortex. And I got excited when she told me this back in 1981, and I said, "But what did you do?" Like I expected some incredible thing. And she looked at me so casual, and she says, "I just kept picking herbs." Like what else was there to do? Tackle him, tie him down, quickly run back and get a camera. Of course, he wouldn't be there. But, so the Native American thinking is very different than Western man. But as the years went on, I lean more towards Native American thinking and less towards Western thinking, because Western thinking is so destructive and wanting to rape the environment and to use simply materialistic things that die off anyway, and then they just accumulate in junk, junkyards and junk everything. And some of this stuff in cell phones and computers and so forth are emitting all these toxins that are carcinogenic, and that destroy the nervous system, creating MS and Parkinson's and all that. So it's outrageous. It's outrageous that we would ever want to have anything to do with any of that stuff. Our technology has superseded our spiritual development. That is, these companies, when they discover this stuff, they don't do anything with it. They don't tell people even that they could be contaminated by these toxins and get sick and die, or lose the quality of life they have and not be able to walk or do things. But it creates jobs for the second biggest industry in the world, which is the healthcare industry, and allopathic doctors that treat symptoms rather than going to the root cause of disease. And of course, these corporate giants that are collecting all this money, and why they feel they need to be multimillionaires and even billionaires is beyond me, because you can only spend so much money and need so much security. And in the end, they have no security anyway, because your only security is in God, however you define it. And that has nothing to do with religion, and I don't belong to a religion. But neither do the Sasquatch people, neither do the star people. This is foxglove. The flowers haven't come out yet. Yellow flowers will come out. And this is foxglove for people who have a severe, serious heart ailment. But the thing is, you have to know how to use it. You use so little of it. Very, very, very little. It was, I think, I'm thinking back, I believe it was about 15 years ago here in Washington State. I was living in Oregon at the time, where this couple wanted some comfrey, and the leaves looked like comfrey. And they went out and said, "Oh, this is comfrey, look." And they had one book, even though they didn't know anything about plants, and they thought it was comfrey, and they wanted to make some comfrey tea. And they made 2 cups of tea from it, and they both drank, 2 cups each, and they found them both dead. So it's that deadly. But if you use tiny amounts for someone that may die because of a heart ailment, because why? It has digitalis. About 75% of what we have now, the pharmacologists have, are from plants. And then they just make them artificially after that and play with the chemistry of them. But that's when they make such powerful, drugs that there's iatrogenesis, which means another disease comes, and like with Lipitor, it starts to destroy your liver and so on. So what good is it? You could take it for so long, and it doesn't belong in the body. It's artificial. Where natural plants, go with the flow of the body to rebalance and to heal, not just, a temporary cure. Everything's being destroyed. Our air, water, soil, food is all contaminated. They add stuff to it even. Almost the government allows that. The FDA allows that as if they want the population to get cancer and dwindle. I don't eat pickles anymore. Yellow dye number 5. I mean, it's carcinogenic. You have all this crap that's in there. Aspartame, which is a artificial sweetener. Why don't they use stevia? Well, because they can't make a lot of money on it. They want something that's chemically done. And stevia is a plant that grows in Paraguay and up in the mountains. And if you found a leaf on this plant that was dried up, and you picked it and crushed it in your hand, and then put a little saliva at the end of your finger and touched it, and then put it in your mouth, you would jump. It would be so sweet. But there's no sugar in it, and it's not sugar. Biochemically, it has nothing to do with sugar. But it's 200 times sweeter than sugar. So, but they use aspartame, which is very, very dangerous. And it's in so many different things. In cough drops, they put them in, and I mean, it's so many different things. But an aspartame is proven to be poisonous and carcinogenic, and it will mess up your body permanently. So
I think Ronald Reagan was a big investor in the original aspartame development process, and he pulled strings to get it through.
Yeah, see, that's
approved quickly.
That's just for money. Why should we use everything for money why don't we do it for the environment? Because the environment's going. And of course, people out here don't understand that because there's still so much wilderness left. Why would anyone in their right mind come out and admit to anything like this unless it was true? And I've got a whole bunch of people that say it's true, 104 people. And what did William James say? He says, it takes only one white crow to prove that all crows are not black. And I've got 104 white crows. And I'm not, very few people are looking. But strangely enough, more and more people are calling me, writing me, and stumbling into my book after breaking off and being discouraged and frustrated, working in these Bigfoot centers and these Bigfoot researchers and Bigfoot groups.
Mothman says I'm dreaming. Mothman says I'm dreaming. Mothman says I'm dreaming. Mothman says I'm dreaming.